What's up, everybody? Hitting wrong buttons as we're getting started, but thanks for joining me for this debate review of the madness that I endured earlier today. It was quite fascinating, very interesting experience, and it's very ironic because the individual, Jeffrey Williams, is on Twitter right now still talking trash about how he utterly annihilated me, and I was full of doublespeak and blather, and just he couldn't help himself but to be laughing at me because it was just that bad, which it's astounding. It's truly astounding. But before we get into all of this, and I'm going to grab some water real quick, I want to play a quick clip from his debate in January with Dr. Cy Gart, and just kind of put things into context as to something you're going to see later from the debate today, where he insisted that he had more experience and knowledge than Dr. Gart himself. It was kind of crazy, but so real quick, I'm gonna play this, and then we'll get going and all that.
And so I feel that the denial of genetic code as a true code stems from the opposite religious view, which is that there is no God. And if there is no God, there cannot be anyone who created a code, and therefore there cannot be a code in life. And to me, that's a religious view that undermines science, because in the science itself, the evidence that DNA is the information-bearing part of the genetic code is overwhelming. I did mention both in my Twitter feeds and also in my debate with Dr. Mays, Herman Mays, on the same topic. I mentioned that all the standard textbooks talking about DNA and genetic code is real, and the word encoding and decoding is used constantly, and Herman agreed with that. But his main point was that even so, that doesn't prove any evidence or proof of God, which I agree with. And in fact, we all know that the majority of biologists are not theists. They are, and certainly they're not Christians. And they're probably not theists, but not the majority. All biologists refer to the genetic code as a code. So it isn't necessary to say, if you're saying that DNA and the genetic code are real codes, if you don't have to posit a creator. That's the first thing I want to say. Now, let's get to the actual topic. And I would like to quote from a blog post, I believe, Jeffrey, that you wrote in response to the video clip that I made. And it's a very interesting post. And the first few lines I want to read first, I completely agree with. You say, semiotics customarily describes code as a set of symbols operating under a set of rules that stand for another object for the purpose of transmitting information. This entails an encoding process, transmission, and a decoding process. That is absolutely, I agree with that 100%. And that's exactly what the genetic code, starting with DNA, does. You unfortunately then say some other things that are not true, that are certainly not correct. For example, you said genes do not encode something that is then transmitted to a decoder. Rather, nucleotides are simply molecules that do what genetic material does, reproduce. That's wrong. And the reason it's wrong is because while it's true that nucleotides are the subunits of DNA and that DNA does reproduce or is reproduced, doesn't do it by itself. The fact that the statement that genes do not encode something that's just wrong. What genes do is they encode the structure of proteins, which is why we have the proteins we have. And it is transmitted to a decoder. That information is transmitted directly through chemical processes. True, it's not through language, it's through a chemical process, but it is absolutely transmitted and decoded. It's decoded by the ribosome, it's transmitted by our RNA, it's translated. In other words, the information in the DNA is translated from nucleic acid chemistry into protein chemistry by a set of molecules that includes transfer RNA and an enzyme called aminoacyl tRNA synthetase, which is able to translate the information from one type of chemistry, nucleic acid chemistry, to a totally different kind of chemistry, protein chemistry. And that signal is then received by the ribosome, which includes a molecule called messenger RNA. The messenger RNA is in fact a messenger that brings the coded information of DNA to the ribosome, where it meets up with and binds with the tRNAs that carry the amino acids that make the protein. It's an absolutely beautiful, highly complex, stunning process, which is biochemical. It obeys the laws of chemistry and physics, but it is everything we want in a code. It has information, it has which is coded, and that code is moderately arbitrary. In fact, it's arbitrary. In other words, the codons that code for each amino acid could be anything. They don't have to be what they are, but that they are what they are, and they are universal. So the fact that it is a chemical process, to me, and anybody else in biology I know, does not mean that there's no coding going on. Because if you look at the genetic code, and there are tables of genetic code, you'll see, for example, that the three nucleotides AAA, which form a codon, every group of 3 nucleotides is a codon, always and only stands for the phrase, put a leucine here, if I remember correctly. I don't have the genetic code memorized. I think AA is leucine. And that there's nothing about AAA that suggests leucine, just as there's nothing about the word dog that suggests an animal that barks, etc. Or the word tree that suggests a very tall plant made out of wood. There's nothing that connects that. So it is a purely semiotic code in the definition of semiotics. And I'm going to stop here and just ask Jeffrey what he means when he says that it's only a metaphor and is not a real code.
All right, so just doing that a little bit, put things in context as to what had happened before today's debate. And he'd obviously had the opportunity to interact with a PhD biochemist who was explaining all this stuff, and when they were debating the exact same topic. But today he's continued, in spite of the hour and a half lecture he got from Dr. Gard explaining this to him back in January. He continued to argue that it was only a metaphor, which you will see here in a few moments. Before we get into actually reviewing the debate, but anyway, wants to join, link is pinned. And Michael, the Canadian Atheist, is actually backstage. And it's ironic because Michael's here. Obviously, appreciate you coming. He and I have our own beef and our back and forth. We've had our interactions in the past, but apparently today may be something that we can agree upon. Is that fair to say, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I hate you, but no, I'm just kidding. It was interesting. I'm not a scientist. I only play one on TV, but it seemed pretty clear that your opponent today wasn't interested in addressing you directly. He wanted to talk, but it seemed like he didn't want to talk to you.
Yeah, I would say it was fair. I mean, he
didn't answer your direct questions.
No, he refused to answer my question. It's kind of ironic. So he went on this whole tangent leading up to, I won't show everybody the negotiations back and forth, but he was insistent on zero open dialogue. He wanted everybody to be muted, except when it was your turn to speak and all those kind of things. And then when we get to the cross exam, it was supposed to be, ask questions and then respond, right? And the ultimate, one of the things I found extraordinarily ironic about this, and you guys will witness this here in a little bit, is in spite of all of the demands for it to be question, answer, and such, he did exactly what he accused me of. And it was very ironic. He went to the extreme. I mean, I don't know how much more direct you have to be that the title of the debate was, is genetic code a real code or a metaphor? I don't know how much more blunt you can possibly be in terms of what the debate about.
That direct question at least half a dozen times. Is it a code? Is it a code? Is it a code? And you were getting increasingly frustrated, clearly. But it was understandable, given that, it's a very simple question. And as you said in the debate, it's yes or no. It's not a, I don't have an issue saying DNA is a code. I don't think that's controversial to say.
Well, Michael, people in chat are saying you need to turn your mic up a little bit. I think you may have your gain down a little bit. Coming through a little soft. Oh,
sure. Yeah, no worries.
Well, no, here's the thing. Yeah, it's much better. Well, to your point on DNA being a code, the irony is that I don't actually argue that DNA in and of itself is the code. I argued that the genetic code is contained inside of the DNA, but not all deoxyribonucleic acids are part of the genetic code. You have, when you have the base pair codon sequences, and then all of them, a bunch of them in the correct order to be equal to all the appropriate amino acids, and in the direct proximity to the promoters and the different activator factors that are not code themselves, but are the regulatory components. That's where the code is specifically, and that's one of the questions everybody will hear later on. He's like, "What did Yaki mean by the genome? The differences between the genome, the genetic code, and DNA?" And I tried to explain. You guys will hear me explain this to him, and he kept insisting that I was not answering the question. And it's like, you have a totality of the information which is the genome, which is the information that's in totality inside of the DNA. You have the DNA itself, which is the medium, the chemical medium, and then you have the genetic code, which is housed within the DNA itself. And that is such basic biology 101 that the fact that it keeps being argued, honestly, I get a massive amounts of entertainment from it, but it just honestly blows my mind. The level of controversy.
Yeah. I think the way you put it there, it's almost like nuance lost. So it's like, so there's a book, right? And on the front of the book, it says, DNA, and you open it up and it's all kinds of different things in it that are part and parcel of it and that make it up. And maybe it might be fair to say that that's where part of the I don't want to call it miscommunication, where part of the dialogue was lost, in that it was more of a nuanced argument, and he was maybe being hyper literal about it, and instead of just making the concession that it's a code, but it's but there's more to it, there's more meat to it than that. Like I said, opening the book and it's all part and parcel together. Like I said, I don't think that it's controversial. But one of the other things that I found interesting was the way the format was laid out, and how there's supposed to be this like opening and then rebuttal and then cross and all that other stuff. And one of the things that I've come to really appreciate in the now several talks I've done, and I'd like to call them talks because I don't even like the word debate anymore, on Donnie's channel on Standing for Truth, is the ability to have a conversation, because the whole, even the word debate now has just become so adversarial that you have a couple people that I don't think you guys were that far apart on a lot of different things, but you were butting heads on this because this is a debate and we have to argue because it's a debate. And I think there's a lot of lost opportunity there in that.
Well, I would agree with you. Then, in many contexts, there is, you got things into, from a competition perspective. Mm-hmm. In this particular context, I would have to disagree with you in terms of the not being that far apart, because it's kind of part of the reason I played his, that clip from his debate with Dr. Gart, because he made even though Dr. Gart tried to very nicely correct him in his position, fast forward to now, he's still, and by the way, since in between his debate with Dr. Gart and then today, I had another interaction with him on my channel months ago, and it was the same talking points, and I sat there and tried to explain things to him, and he just kept screaming over and over again that it's nothing but a metaphor. And it's like, well, a metaphor means that it's something, by definition, if something is a metaphor, that means it's not literally what it's being called or being associated with.
Yeah, and I have to claim ignorance on that because I didn't see the first talk. I'd have to go back and look at that.
I'm just saying, I'm talking about right now. I'm just talking about the the definition of the word metaphor. And if the debate is whether or not something is literal or it's a metaphor, if you're claiming it's a metaphor and your argument is that it's a metaphor, that means by definition that it is not actually a code.
Sure. Yeah.
By definition, there's no way around it. So either you are 100% against the other position, or you are 100% for it. Like, there's no way around this. When you're talking about something that is a definable, has definable characteristics, has well documented and well established principles, if something fulfills all of them, then by definition, it is what, if something is fulfills everything that in a definition for something, then that's what it is. I mean,
seems reasonable, yeah.
Right. So when you're getting into things like arbitrary value assignments, you have the syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. You have all those different components that are necessary for it. You have translation mechanisms, all those different pieces of the puzzle. And this is something there's like plethora of papers written on. And right now there's a $10 million prize if you can figure out how to create one through purely naturalistic means. At this point, I don't know what further has to be argued. And as people will witness in the debate when we get to play here in just a minute, get started on it, is he kept insisting that I was only arguing for intelligent design or a creator of some kind, which I never did a single time. And more importantly, whether or not there is or is not one, and whether or not it is an evidence for or is not evidence for, that has zero bearing on whether what is being examined is.
Yeah, that's a different argument. If you had to steelman his position, why do you think he would argue it as a metaphor?
If you listen to today and from his other talks, it's The reason that if he clings so desperately to being a metaphor is if it's actually a code, then by default, a coder would be required. He recognizes that if it actually is code, that from his perspective, if it is really a code, then there must be a coder, and there's no other way around it. And
I would disagree with him there, because I don't argue that it's a code, but I think it begs the question to say it has to be a coder. But that's a whole different thing. And you and I agree on that.
No, I'm saying that was his position.
Right.
That was what he kept arguing. And it's like I reiterated multiple times, what's weird, that wasn't what I was there to argue. I was adamantly not arguing that. Well, I was not there to do it, and it was not my intent. I had no interest in doing so because I didn't need to in terms of what the debate was. But anyway, let's get down into this. I'm going to skip basically to our cross-examine period because I almost fell asleep in his rebuttal. It was and if anybody wants to join in,
jump right into the meaty stuff there, because the cross-examination is where it really got heated.
Huh? Yeah, that's where I'm jumping to.
Is where it got heated.
Yeah, that's where I'm jumping to. Let's see. All right. What just happened here? What is happening? What is going on right now?
All right, you guys, I wanted to make sure to include a how to read the genetic code.
Not sure what just happened there. This debate. Okay, hang on one second. Figure out what just happened here. Okay, what is going on, YouTube?
Just get direct clarification from you. Are you state the definition of metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase applies to an object or action?
Okay, I think I found it again. Somehow YouTube had jumped it to the very end. It's crazy. All right. All right, here we go.
Good job. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to do some rebuttals, and each side is going to have the opportunity to present the other side with a question. The other's going to have 2 minutes to answer the question. Is that my understanding? Does that work out well with you two?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if the audience has any questions.
So, actually, I believe we're doing like 2 10-minute rounds. So like I'll have 10 minutes across exam, and they'll have 10 minutes.
Okay, yes.
So again, ladies and gentlemen, I have not made this remotely about a intelligent agent coder being necessary. And he keeps reading from court rulings about that exact topic and ignoring whether or not it's actually a code. I need to share my screen again. But first I want to just get direct clarification from you. Are you state the definition of metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase is applied to an object or action which is not literally applicable? So is it your position specifically that using the word code in the actual literal sense is not directly applicable to the genetic code?
It's a poor definition, and the word applicable is loaded here.
Okay. So is it, again, your direct position that the code is not literal?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to get your response to this.
Genes, which from my point of view are absolutely central to biology, genes are information. They are coded information. It even looks like computer information. I mean, a chromosome is a great long computer tape. It's linear, it runs one-dimensional digital code. It's not binary, it's quaternary, but apart from that, it's just the same as computer tape. It's read in sequence. It's copied and pasted from one part of the organism to another in just the same way as a computer programmer would copy and paste. So biology has turned into computer science.
So go ahead. What's your direct rebuttal of Dawkins?
Well, first of all, that's again a loaded question. It presumes a certain interpretation that might not be.
No, I don't understand what he means by presumes and what your interpretation is. I mean, Michael, I'd love your opinion. Is that relatively straightforward? I didn't personally have any confusion as to what was being stated there by Dawkins. Did you?
Oh no, not at all. I mean, and he's restated this many times, many forums, both live and in print and in every other way. It's so my bluntly honest interpretation of this was you played this for him and he was like, well, shit, what do I say now? Because there's no ambiguity in what Dawkins said at all.
Well, no, I would agree with you on that, but multiple people have told me like they think he was just trying to save face and play a game, but I don't know. This is multiple instances, not just today, but multiple others where he's made the same assertions, and then when people of more credibility than I, like a Dr. Sygart, have also made the same points. He's continued to claim that, and you'll hear this in a few moments, claim that he is more knowledgeable than they.
Well, I heard him say that. I heard him say that in the debate. That you asked him directly if he believed he was more qualified to comment on it than Sygart, and he's just blatantly said yes. And I mean, my comment, not that he's going to listen to me, like who am I that this guy's going to listen to? But if you think you've got the stones to take down someone like Dawkins, and just publish a paper and you'll be famous. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, it was amazing. All right.
Be exact of what Dawkins' meaning was. But first of all, let me say that Dawkins is an extreme reductionist and makes errors all the time because of that. But if you listen to what he said here, he talked about how it is just like, that's metaphorical language. And he talked about how biology has become very much like information, which is true, because that's the metaphor we're using. But in fact, Barbieri, whose name you slaughtered, Gerard Bataille, whose name you slaughtered, both of them wrote books on how.
I need you to respond to Charles Dawkins. No. If we're doing cross-exam, you have to answer the questions that I ask. You don't go. We're talking about Dawkins right now. He said it was a. He said no. You're not answering the question. Moderator, please. Okay, so Michael, I'd love your opinion on. Do you understand why I was insisting he got back to the topic, not going off on a rabbit trail that had nothing? Especially, I mean this in the context of we were in the middle of the cross-exam period. If it were like an open discussion or something like that, totally different context. In a cross-exam period,
he's just trying to. Yeah, he's trying to. It's like I said before. And sorry, I should have asked you whether or not it was okay to curse on your channel. I understand your.
Yeah, dude, I cuss on my channel. You're good.
Okay, all right, sure. I didn't want to offend anyone. But like I said before, it's like he's like, well, shit, and so he rabbit trails off, right? And it was hard because I commend you for staying as composed as you were, even though you said Charles Dawkins there instead of Richard Dawkins, because I like it. But yeah, I get it. You were flustered and frustrated, and I get that, and it's easy to get that way when people are purposely trying to obfuscate the conversation and take it somewhere when they're like, I mean, there's no harm. And this is where I think where the adversarial part comes in about a debate, right? Because it's a debate, because it's so adversarial, you can't concede a point. You dare not concede a point. And this is a point that isn't even like, it's like, it is like if you're looking at a tennis match, like the ball has bounced, you've won the point. It's fairly clear, but he can't give it to you.
Right. It's he doesn't realize we're in. Well, I just hit an ace, and he wants to go into a volley, I guess.
And for everybody watching the chat, if anyone's seen John and I interact before, I think this is the first time we've interacted since MDD. But you know, I don't blow sunshine on people's asses. If I felt a certain way, that's exactly what I'd say, and because I feel this way, that's why I'm saying it. I'm not trying to earn points with anything. It's my honest opinion.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, like I said, if anybody wants to go see the 3 rounds of debates that Michael and I had, you can definitely see that we are definitely not. Nobody would accuse us of being buddy. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're not. We haven't made each other's Christmas cards lists yet.
Very true. Very true.
Okay.
No.
So-
Okay. Then if you've answered the question, you don't get to go on. It's cross-exam right now, buddy. Good grief. So you are direct. So you are directly rejecting the position that it's a quaternary, a digital quaternary code. Are you stating it is? He said it was a digital quaternary code. Are you formally rejecting that statement?
Answer when you shut up.
Are you rejecting that it is a formal, that is a quaternary digital code? Are you formally rejecting that statement? I'll move on to my next question. Yes or no?
SJ?
Let me have, if you want
to. We had an agreement that one mic would be on at a time. While I'm answering, his mic needs to be off. When I'm done answering, he can say anything he wants, and I won't interrupt him. But please turn his mic off.
Okay.
Do you want us to do it this way?
All right, so everybody just make sure you listen to this, because when you go to his cross-exam period, you will realize that, yeah, all the stuff he's like whining about right now, completely out the window.
Do you want us to wait? Let me ask real quick. I stopped the timer, so I just want to ask a quick question. Do you want to do where, John, you had this question, you had Dawkins here. Do you want me to give Jeffrey 2 minutes exactly to answer, and he can say whatever he wants in that 2 minutes?
Exactly. Right.
As long as Jeffrey, I'm the one answering the question that SJ just leveled.
Okay. Yeah. You're also
in this context,
and breaking the agreement.
I'm not breaking any agreement, buddy. Hang on.
You are completely unable to control yourself. I will answer the way I want to answer.
I'm trying to talk to the moderator right now. We're on timeout right now. We're getting this worked out. So SJ, I would like you to be a moderator, please. In this context, we're in a cross-exam period, and I am asking direct questions from here on out. I will be asking leading questions with yes or no answers. Okay. If he does not answer yes or no, then we will move on to the next one. If he wants to answer yes or no and then go on for 2 minutes, that's fine. However, if you want to talk about breaking agreements, Jeffrey, this is about, the title of this debate is the genetic code literal or a metaphor? So let's continue on. Let's get back to this. I will keep my mouth shut if you answered yes or no.
I will not answer yes.
Do you know how cross-examination works in a court of law?
Yes or no. I'm sorry.
In a cross-exam? Yeah, that's how that works.
I will not answer a leading question with a yes or no. I won't do it.
Well, then that's the point. Then you're being a coward.
Okay, fine. I'm being a coward, but I'm not.
You can caveat yourself all day long after you answer yes or no. This is cross-exam. That's how cross-examinations work.
You know what?
And you will get to do the same to me. And you will get to do the same to me for 10 minutes.
I have 2.
That's how cross-examinations work.
Because you've got no answers. But I will not answer a leading question.
All right, moving on. You will answer yes or no. You will answer yes or no, and then you have 2 minutes.
Yes, you will do.
No, I won't.
No, here's what we're going to do. So Jeff, here's what.
So I felt like I was in like middle school.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because this was like, and this will trigger some people, and I don't care, but it was like a Darth Dawkins level of argumentation, because he wanted to, he wanted to say what he wanted to say, but didn't want to listen to anything else that you wanted to say, and when you specifically said that you can answer the question with a yes or no, and then caveat as much as you want. So it's like yes and or no but, and you weren't saying that he couldn't offer clarification to his answer, but just answer the question. Like, you can answer me a direct yes or no question, and if there's nuance to be added to my answer, then I'll say yes, John, and or but, and then clarify the reason you've said yes or the reason you've said no. And the laughing and it's just bullshit, really. Like, it was pretty. I didn't envy SJ in the moment, for sure.
Well, we're about to get to a very fun part here. We're coming up on the spot where he says he's more qualified than PhDs.
That's what I'm gonna do. John, you just presented Dawkins. We want to go back to Dawkins and ask your question again. I'm gonna turn it back on. What you want him to get at, what you want him to answer, yes or no, or at least just explain himself. Because sometimes it's hard to say yes or no. You kind of want to offer an explanation, but he has 2 minutes for that to stay on the topic on Dawkins.
He can offer his explanation.
I will answer the way
Jeffrey, the question was asked towards me from
I
SJ.
will
Please be quiet.
answer the question the way I choose to answer.
He must answer my direct questions, yes or no, and then he can ramble for 2 minutes all day long, as long as it's about the question.
Sorry, I will not answer leading.
We're gonna move on. We're moving on to the next one then. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so I'm gonna start. I'll start it again. So here we go. So I'm at 2 minutes and 55 seconds. So I stopped that last one. So here we go.
Genes.
This is the reason why I love biology, though. Biology is self-assembling nanotechnology with a built-in programming language. No other nanotechnology has this. This is really important.
Now, the direct question in relation to that is, here we have a code table that directly maps out the codon, binary, and amino acid alphabets. And we're talking about machine code here. And I want to know directly if you are contradicting and stating that this is not a direct machine language comparison here of and they're being translated into each other. Yes or no, and then you can ramble.
It is a translation into a code from something that isn't code. That's an abstraction.
Okay, did you hear what he just said there? It's being translated from something that isn't a code. Like you can't have something. One of the whole aspects of like a Turing complete code, for example, is it can be translated into any other Turing complete code. That's how it works. Like you can translate them into different ones. That's one of the foundational aspects of code. If something is coded and has an alphabet, then if you have the appropriate translation mechanisms that know what the other alphabet is being translated into, so source to target alphabets, then you can assign those values to anything else. We do this all the time in translation of, even from the English alphabet to the Spanish alphabet, which is very, very close, right? We have all these, this is very fundamental concepts, and he's arguing that isn't somehow just very, very basic. Like, this is not high level science here. We're talking about just root level 101 type stuff. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, and again, I don't want to seem like I'm being overly simplistic, but from the outsider's perspective, looking in at someone who watched this as it happened, it's as I said before, it's like I can't concede this point. Like to say it's like what you said before, it's something derived from a code. It's like I'm not gonna concede your point. I'm going to talk, instead of addressing what you said, I'm going to talk around what it is that you said, because I can't concede the point.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
It just as Yaki was saying, you can abstract a code from it, but that's not the physical. That isn't the physical reality. Or same thing as Carol was saying, that's not the physical reality. Those are abstractions that understand it from the perspective of technological code.
Okay. Okay. You weren't paying attention apparently to the difference between information and communication theory. Information is measurement of the capacity of the channel. Communication deals with semantics. That was why the communication model was Shannon Weaver himself, Claude Shannon himself, talked about the semantic meaning not be accounted for in information theory. That's why they developed communication theory. But we'll move on from there.
So
okay.
No, let's not move on. What does
I would like
to do
to
with my
quote
point?
from a blog post, I believe, Jeffrey, that you wrote in response to the video clip that I made, and it's a very interesting post. And the first few lines I want to read first, I completely agree with. You say, semiotics customarily describes code as a set of symbols operating under a set of rules that stand for another object for the purpose of transmitting information. This entails an encoding process, transmission, and a decoding process. That is absolutely, I agree with that 100%. And that's exactly what the genetic code, starting with DNA, does. You unfortunately then say some other things that are not true, that are certainly not correct. For example, you said genes do not encode something that is then transmitted to a decoder. Rather, nucleotides are simply molecules that do what genetic material does, reproduce. That's wrong.
So do you, obviously you had a debate here on this channel, ironically, with the PhD biochemist and Dr. Seigard, where he explained to you in great detail, number one, how you were wrong, and number two, how your understanding of protein synthesis was whacked out and you were just incorrect. So do you formally reject the position of Dr. Seigard that the genetic code is a literal code?
Yes.
Awesome. So are you more qualified than a editor of peer-reviewed journals, a tenured professor, and somebody who is currently doing research on this topic?
Yes.
Wow. More qualified. Fascinating. Okay.
What is Jeffrey's position, background? Like, what's his resume? I have no idea.
Dr. Garrett?
No, Jeffrey, the guy you were talking about.
I think he was in business. I think he was like, he's talked about being an economist.
Well, that makes total sense. And he's totally more qualified than a scientist. Yeah.
And I believe he's not retired, and he like delves in philosophy and such. And yeah, but ladies and gentlemen,
well, you
just heard him say twice, not once, but he double confirmed that he was more qualified than the man who had tried to explain all of this to him, and he knows more than my interpretation, Dr. Gard's interpretation, Richard Dawkins' interpretation of all of the evidence is just categorically incorrect. And you guys, I haven't played this for y'all, but at the beginning of the deal, I played a clip from the CEO of one of the largest biotech companies on the planet that just actually had an IPO. And he was going into detail about how it's digital code, it's programmable, all these other kind of things. And he even says something like, well, this is without question. Like, we know this was without question. And it's like, man, I don't know how many more people have to completely annihilate your position before you don't just say, you're making an authority, you're doing an authority claim fallacy. And it's like, well, okay. So which one of us, like, can nobody make an argument? If it disagrees with you, is it therefore, per your own statement, you're more qualified, even if by definition they're more qualified?
Well, that wouldn't hold any water. That wouldn't hold any water anyway, because an appeal to authority fallacy is when you're appealing to someone who isn't an authority.
Right.
I don't agree with Seigard at the base level, the same as I don't agree with you, and point a finger at another Christian. I disagree with you at a fundamental level, but when you're citing an expert in the field, that is not an appeal. If I cited Richard Dawkins on history, that's an appeal to authority fallacy.
Right.
But if I cite him on biology, it's not, because he's an expert. And so, this guy, it's like he brought a philosophy book to a science fight. So, I mean, you can do that if you want to, but it's not going to work out too well for you.
No, it's yeah. So, Izzy, a minute ago, you were pontificating about how the physical medium, or the physical aspect of it, has nothing to do with code, and it's just abstraction and so on and so forth. Do you hold that the medium can have absolutely nothing to do with the syntax?
I suppose it's possible. Why do you ask?
Well, you claim that because it's molecules and such, that somehow it's not actually, can't actually be code. So as you're looking at this picture here, are those assumed like that block of wood up at the top? Would that be a different medium than the metal one next to it?
Yes, it's a different medium.
Okay, but the syntactic, both the syntax and the semantic values are the same, correct?
It has no semantic value.
So you're saying that the T is not, from a coding perspective, the T is not, the shape of it, physical shape, is not part of the syntax?
No, it's simply raw information. Actually, I wasn't pontificating.
Answer the question. You're saying that's not?
I was reading from Yaki, who made that exact same point. He said information and semantics and meaning are not the same thing. You could have a disk drive of 100 megabytes, and it could be absolutely empty, or it could contain Shakespeare, but it's the same. It's still just information. It's the equal information of 100 megabytes. Yes, that's right. And that comes from
Okay, so many aspects of this that are just blowing me away. Okay, so for those of you who are unaware, there's information theory and there's communication theory. So information, and you've heard the term raw Shannon information, is just measuring the amount of raw information that can go through and the capacity of a channel for that information to pass through. This is very straightforward stuff. Claude Shannon himself, along with Weaver, recognized that when you're talking about just the raw Shannon information, number of bytes and everything, it has zero to do with the semantic value. And this is why one of the papers I read from earlier in this debate, when they're talking about, hey, originally we thought there was no semantics, and we sure as heck thought there was no pragmatics. There was only syntax, and that theoretically, when you're talking about just purely the shape and the chemical affinities, that that probably explains why this thing that looks like code isn't necessarily a literal code. Then when they just began to discover that there's semantics and there's pragmatics, then you have to apply communication theory to the genetic code as well, because it has all of the facets. It has both syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Now, in the context of what I'm asking about here is on multiple fronts. So number one, he's claiming that the physical shape from a semiotics perspective has zero relevance to the syntax. And it's like, well, no, that is categorically false, number one. And then number two, the reason I brought up this picture of the wooden blocks is both the case or the holder for those letters is made out of wood, as well as those letters. And this is where the whole aspect of DNA being deoxyribonucleic acid, and then that also contains the genetic code, but it's not actually, just because it's DNA doesn't mean that it is code. Just like the wood that you see there can be both letters or it can just be the container. But they're both made out of the exact same medium. And it's where the shape from the syntax comes into play. And then beyond that, from our perspective, when you're applying semantic values to those symbols, then you're being able to derive, in that context, we know the sounds and what's going to happen from a pragmatic perspective. When you put the B next to the L, then you're going to get a slightly different sound, and S next to a T, and C next to an H, all those kind of things. You have a long vowel versus a short vowel. All those things are both semantic and pragmatic variations to the expression of the information that is derived, that is operating under the shapes. And then obviously you get into grammar from our context of, commas and colons and dashes and all that kind of stuff. But all that logic applies to the genetic code, and he's just continuing to somehow think that I'm completely off to lunch when this is very, very basic communication theory. Does that all compute with you, Michael?
Well, like I said before, I'm not a scientist. Most of the stuff that you said, I've read bits about, but like I said, I think they're all part and parcel. I think it's all chapters of the same book, and I don't think it's controversial. It doesn't seem controversial, and the way you just explained it, especially with the box and the letters, it makes perfect sense. Like it does, CH, TH, all those things. It all makes sense. I'm not sure what else to say to that. I don't think it's controversial.
What's up, Jamie? Welcome to the stream. How you doing, brother?
I'd go on camera. Hi, Michael. Hi, John. I'm going to stay off camera. I just finished staining house for like 13 hours, so I'm pretty messy. But
no worries. We'll forgive you for not being on camera.
Yeah, this guy's always a good laugh because he's so confident, but he just doesn't seem to know what he's talking about.
No, it gets worse.
Yeah,
That's raw Shannon. Okay. Do you understand the difference between raw Shannon information and functional information?
No.
Okay. So
how would it be relevant?
Okay. Dr. Gard actually addressed this in your conversation with him when he explained to you the importance of the syntactic or the sequence order because of its being equal to specific amino acids. And if you don't have it in a specific order, then you don't get the correct sequence of amino acids creating a polypeptide chain.
No,
dude, hang on. Hang on. Okay,
it has no correlation to the blocks that he showed. None. That had nothing to do with syntax.
Okay, syntax is the. He keeps denying the obvious. It's truly amazing, and then claiming that I'm the one who has no knowledge. It's truly fascinating.
When was this debate?
Yeah, it was earlier today.
Okay. I wonder because I haven't seen it before. You're wearing the same shirt, so.
Yeah, it was like 2:00 this afternoon. rules and the structure of something like the
Right.
shape.
What rules did your blocks have? What were the rules there? What were the rules? No, tell me. What were the rules?
Hang
You're
on,
thoroughly dishonest. You're throwing out words, hoping to confuse.
Hey,
an audience
moderator,
that might be somewhat
moderator,
naive.
please. You're not in cross-examination right now, buddy.
No,
You
I'm
get
Okay, we
showing
only have-
dishonesty.
Okay, please stop this.
Okay,
man.
guys, we only have about a minute left for this part of the thing. So can we try to wrap it up in a minute and then go to the next?
Sure.
Okay, so in this context, is you see those letters in that image, correct?
Yes, I see.
Okay, are they of specific shapes?
They certainly are.
Do they have syntactic values in relation to the English language?
No, they have symbolic language. The syntax is something entirely different.
Syntax is the rules and the structure.
What
semantics is the meaning.
Semantics. Tell me the rules in that picture. What rules do you see?
Oh my God!
Your knowledge you don't see any rules, do you?
Staggering.
Because you haven't a clue what you're talking about. Not a clue.
God.
Show me the rules in that picture. What are the rules? Name the rules.
I don't even know what to say at that one. I mean, it's
look at
pretty straightforward stuff.
He's clearly in charge. Look at him. He's relaxed. He must be right.
Yeah, but the universal code for I win when you put your hands behind your head like that.
That's right.
Oh yeah, it was cracking me up. My level of frustration at this point was getting to such a degree of just like
pretty high. You were pretty pissed. Like you were.
No, no. Here's the thing. I actually wasn't pissed. I was more in just the level of like, this is so ridiculous. To be honest, I had anticipated some of this, like because I'd watched other debates. I had an interaction with him, and I knew he was going to go into full scale denial and still claim that he was winning. And was somehow I was the one that was unknowledgeable. However, it's part of the reason I had done all this preparation to put things in such a direct context that I didn't anticipate somebody being the level of denial of just like refusing to recognize the obvious on so many different levels was just like, you got to be kidding me. Like he's going to keep doubling down on some of the most basic principles while claiming that I'm the ignorant one. Wow. It's truly fascinating. Just like he's doing it on Twitter right now. He's been talking trash ever since the debate got over and talking about how I was full of blather, double speak. Shouldn't know what I was talking about. Should be embarrassed.
You did do a lot of double speak, but it was repeating yourself because he wouldn't stop and listen to what you said. So in fairness, you did repeat yourself a lot, but it wasn't without reason.
Yeah.
So,
that's the sarcastic jerk in me.
No, I get you. So you're saying that I was double speaking, but not necessarily in the 1984 version of double speak.
Repetitive double speak, just same thing twice. Yeah. Not.
Okay, so are we switching?
You can't do it, can you, John? John, you can't do it. You can't do it. So it's my turn to ask you some questions.
So,
my turn to ask you some questions, John. You failed on that. Let's see how you do on this.
Okay.
Okay, good. Buddy.
When
So I'm starting the 10 minutes right now.
I won't even need the 10 minutes. When Yaki says DNA, the genome, and the genetic code are entirely different things, what differentiates them, and why does Yaki think that's important enough to mention?
Okay, so the genome is the entirety of it, right? So do you the entire
the DNA, the genome?
I'm answering your question, buddy. I'm answering your question. So
yeah, no, you're.
Now, folks, I want you to pay close attention because I answer his question in quite specific detail, and then he will continue to claim that I didn't answer the question and didn't understand the question. Apparently, just pay attention.
You're dancing is what you're doing. You haven't a clue how to answer this question.
I haven't even finished 2 sentences, bro.
Okay,
now
go ahead.
So the genetic code is the codon table. It's the value. This is 64 codons and the organization of the base pairs to be equal to a amino acid. That is the genetic code. Okay. Then you have regulatory components. You have short tandem repeats. You have ALUs. You have pseudogenes. You have a plethora of other aspects of the genome that deal with regulation and expression of the genetic code itself. This is very, very, very basic biology 101.
No,
okay?
no.
So,
let me ask the question again because you didn't answer it. We'll just stay on this question a whole 10 minutes. I don't care. DNA.
you asked me the difference, correct?
No, I did, but you didn't answer it. DNA,
Yes, I did.
The genome, and genetic code. What are the differences between those three things?
Okay, the DNA is the deoxyribonucleic acid. That is the physical chemical medium that is in its entirety. Okay, then inside of that, you have the genetic code, which is the 64 codons that are in sequences, which are equal to proteins and enzymes. Okay. The genome is the entirety of the information, right? Okay. That is contained inside of the DNA medium and is expressed through a genetic code, which is the sequential organization of the arbitrary assigned data values of the different codons. This is an uncontroversial premise.
Pretend you had a reason.
If you actually think I'm wrong on this, this is hilarious.
But let's get to the second part of the question. Why did he think it was important to recognize the difference between those three entities?
Pause it for a second, John.
Because not.
So he's asking you to go to the second part of the question. So is that a concession that you answered the first part of the question? I mean, you did answer the first part of the question. So now he's saying, let's jump forward to the second part of the question, which is a new question because he asked you the one question. He didn't ask you two questions.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying you think he's conceding that I answered the question? Because I think he doubles down in a minute that I didn't answer the question. I didn't understand the question.
Well, no. So he asked the question. You answered the question, and then he just said, "Let's go on to the second part of the question." But there was no second part of the question. It's a whole new question, and so it's to me, again, to the outsider, it's dancing around.
Not to mention, he said we can stay out the whole 10 minutes on this right here, as if he knew for sure that you were going to go on without making a cogent answer. You do, and then he pretends, he throws in the second part as if it was there in the first place, which it wasn't. And he even made the claim that we can stay the whole time on this thing because you're going to be full of it. And then sure enough, it is a concession with, reluctantly.
No,
that's what it sounds like anyway.
Okay, yeah, I guess I can see that. I'll have to listen to that part again. I don't know. I still have the heat of the moment from back then. But every aspect of the genome is code. It's regulatory functions. It's on-off switches. It's logic rules. Hello? What the hell do you think promoters are?
I will.
What do you think? Oh my God, dude! This is hilarious.
Why did he think it was important to mention that?
Because people like you are ignorant morons who don't grasp very, very basic things of basic biology. What do you think I was reading in those papers? And they're talking about how many people are ignorant of these things, which is why they need education in how all this stuff works. So they'll stop being confused and they won't be like you and quote philosophy papers looking from things from the 1950s versus 2017, 2018, 2019 papers.
I quoted not one paper from. I quoted not one paper from the 1950s, not one.
The philosophical paper that you referred to, he specifically stated he was looking at things from the 50s.
Yes.
And the things he was referring to were from the 50s.
The perspective of the 2019.
Right. And then the paper that I quoted from,
being dishonest and being one of the propagandists that YT has warned us about. You haven't given a straight answer to anything. You talk fast and give nonsense answers.
Okay, you on to your next question?
Yeah. Why did he think it was important enough to mention?
I just want to say it was by a concession. I mean, it was like he was forced to, unless he just wants to be completely incoherent, he was forced to, acknowledge that you answered it and move on to something else. It wasn't so much that it was a voluntary,
Yeah, but is he actually conceding though? Because he just asked me again why it was important.
Yeah, now he's gonna try to, being butthurt, he'll try to make it seem like it was something else, of course, or presumably.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not missing it. This is the third time, right?
No, it's like a concession by omission, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you answered it, so he's forced to move on to something else, and so in that sense, yeah, he's forced to acknowledge it for the sense of remaining in like conversationally coherent or whatever.
It's like, John. It's like, what a lie of omission is, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and so this is just a concession of omission. Like that's what it sounds like. It's like he asked you a direct question, you answered the question, and he just moved on to something else, without acknowledging. He didn't even really acknowledge what you said. He's just moved on to the next thing. Is why did he say it was important?
Right. And it's very ironic that Andrew Cumming, the little child boy that loves to talk trash. It's slightly ironic, LBP, you saying you are not a biologist and are not inerrant on any biological subjects. I don't claim to know everything. I do, however, claim to know the very, very basics of what is being discussed here and being denied by this clown Jeffrey Williams. So unless you're going to double down and you want to claim that he's correct in all this, feel free. But I don't claim to know everything. Never have. The basics of information communication theory, DNA, genetic code. I know that stuff. It's not that complicated to understand if you just go and actually read it, which I'm pretty sure, Andrew, unless something's changed, you still haven't done in the past year, even though you continue to talk mad trash. So anyway.
John, you used to have your diapers changed too, John.
Well, that's true. That's true. I've already answered that question.
No, you haven't. You have.
Yes, you don't comprehend the answer. That's not my problem.
Oh, really?
I have answered the question.
What don't I comprehend?
Okay, what is is DNA a chemical medium?
It's a molecule.
Okay, and does it
You know
house
what a
the genetic
molecule
code?
is, right? Because I'm not even sure.
I
you know
do.
that.
I do.
What's a
Now,
molecule? Tell us what a molecule is.
Oh my God. Okay. Are the nucleotides bound together by hydrogen bonds? Are the
you forgot
nucleotides bound together by hydrogen
my
bonds?
question was, do you know what a molecule is?
A molecule, it's atoms held together by chemical bonds that can form in a variety of manners and angles, and in a plethora of different ways. Isomers. They could be polypeptide chains. They could be just like this is. Are you asking what a molecule is? And we're talking about the sequential organization of genetic sequences.
Yeah,
there's 66. Okay. I believe in a GC there's 66 atoms, and in an AT there's 64 atoms that make up those molecules. Are you happy now?
Do you know what a molecule is? That's just being a condescending prick.
Yeah, I don't even, that one, it's like, I don't even know how to respond to that. It's like, did you not learn about like H2O? Like what I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I learned what a molecule was in middle school and again in high school and then again in college. Like this is not some kind of like crazy high level science that we're talking about here in terms of like the basics of like molecular structure and such. Like it's, I don't know. Okay, do you guys think that he's just actually being that much of a dick, or is actually operating from such a egotistical perspective? He thinks I might not actually know this.
No, at that point, I think it's trying to, it's like you throw enough shit at the wall, some's going to stick, and so it's just a way to, asking you a simple question with the tone of voice implying you probably don't know what it is. It's like a clever way of insulting your intelligence. Do you actually know what it is, though, John? Like, do you?
Yeah, really? He's really poor at like trying to find a way to just use rhetoric against you, but it's really like a really bad fail because it's over the top, ridiculous. Like he ought to know better to try to. I mean, maybe he's just not capable, but surely he could find a better way to try to make you look bad than that.
Yeah, well, I get that he's trying to make me look bad, but it's like his level of knowledge is so minimal. It's like a ridiculous level of hyperconfidence that's unjustified. I'm just like, dude, you don't know this stuff yourself, and then you're acting like I must have the same level of ignorance as you. I mean, I just
does he really think you're that dumb? Is the question, and I think he doesn't. I'll give him enough credit to think it's just really just rhetoric, but I can't be sure.
Yeah, but part of the problem is that if you say something, you can say almost anything, and if you say it with a high enough degree of confidence, people will believe it.
True, very true.
And so it's So I think, and this is me. I mean, I'm guessing here. I'm purely hypothesizing, but generally speaking, he is, even at this point, more calm than you are, right? You're getting frazzled because of this, not unjustifiably, but you're getting frazzled, and so maybe he thinks he can throw you more off, or throw you off more by chucking out these snide little comments and veiled insults at you, in the hopes to put you, quote unquote, more off your game.
Right. No, that makes sense. Maybe a little Trash talker in the side chat, isn't molecule referring to size, not substance and structure? So let's just read the definition of molecule. A group of atoms bonded together representing the smallest fundamental unit of a chemical compound that can take part in a chemical reaction. So, yeah. Anyway, pretty sure that's relatively close to what I said.
I really like that name though. Parody Bear. Parody Bear.
Yeah. Can we continue on to an actually relevant question?
Oh, they're relevant questions. You have no relevant answers. How would you react to Yaki's statement that people who understand the sequence hypothesis, proteins, and the genetic text, that is the genome, know that the only thing that is mathematically identical between proteins, the genome, and the written language is that they are sequences? What do you mean by that?
So there's a variety of angles on that. So number one, the genetic code, excuse me, the genetic code is a machine code. Number one, it's machine code, it's not a language in the aspect that we talk about it. Just like a programming language in terms of the way we're writing, in PHP, for example, is not the exact same as how we would be writing in English or Chinese or Arabic. That doesn't mean that at the root level, and this is where the aspect of extensions of alphabets come into play, into strings, and the arbitrary value assignment of block codes comes into play. So when you go into the mathematical measurement aspect of it, we do have the ability, just like with any computer code, we have the ability to measure the mathematical information in genetic code, which is things that are being done right now. By the way, SciGart is actually involved in a research project on this exact topic as they're looking into this in terms of abiogenesis. So we can measure the mathematical values in genetic code, but it's a different math
question.
Yes, I am answering the question.
I got two more questions.
Okay, so Cheryl asked the question, why is he laughing like a fool? Do you think he was not understanding the words that were coming out of my mouth? I feel like I was answering his question pretty directly.
I don't know that he wasn't understanding you. But again, and this is just me hypothesizing, but it seems like at this point and again, not really know anything about the man, but it seems to me from the mannerisms, from the tone, from the way the entire discussion went, that he's got a Dixie cup and he's bailing the Titanic. Because he knows that but you can laugh, you can make these comments, and you can just ha ha ha, silly little boy, you don't actually know, and pat on the head and I'll teach you better, and that can be dramatic, and it's not going to do anything to influence you, but someone else who's watching it may be influenced by it and may think, oh, this guy's, he's just being nice to this young man who really doesn't know any better, and who's just, he's just reading off his script, and he's just puppeting things he's heard other people say, and I've got a gray beard and I'm leaning back with my hands against my head, so I'm obviously more learned.
Yeah, you could have said absolutely anything, and you would have gotten that response. Didn't matter.
Fair.
Yeah, you could have said the most brilliant thing that's ever been uttered, or you could have said you could have given baby talk, and he would have. I don't think he's hearing you. He doesn't want to hear you. Or he is, and he doesn't care, and it's pure posturing. That was just. They're just really at this point. That's all it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One of them is, were you aware of Yaki's letter responding to the FTE amicus brief before this debate?
100%.
Really?
100% aware. Yeah,
So
I'm aware that he was actually against ID all the way to his death. But I am also aware of the fact that he always argued that the genetic code was an actual code. I mean, how do you suggest that he compared the genetic code and its structure and its syntax directly to the zip code +4 model that we have from the paper that I read from? This is clearly delineated.
John, I read his response. My last question is, would you be prepared to agree with Yaki, with Barbieri, whose name you totally messed up, and Gerard Bataille, that there is no creator of the code, and the coder is really not a consciousness of any sort. It is natural selection. Would you agree with that?
Well, I believe that none of them actually stated that natural selection is what was the origin of the code.
Actually, all three did. All three did. In fact,
no.
I read from Yaki. I just read it from him that he said.
So he clearly did not understand, or was just refusing to acknowledge that the arguments for evolution of the code over time is not, in terms of it changing into different things and becoming more optimal, is nothing to do with whether or not it's actually a code. So if it's evolving to be through natural selection to be a better code, then that means it is a code, which is the entire freaking point of the debate. Is it a code, a literal one, or a metaphor? But that aside,
yeah, great.
Sorry, what did you say, Jamie?
That's a great point. It concedes the debate, really. If it evolved, then yeah, it's surely a code in that sense.
But then beyond that, the whole point of he's trying to somehow explain away, like, it's not a code if it evolved through natural selection, which was acting as the coder. It's like, again, I'm not arguing for an intelligent agent. No, not a single time in the entire debate did I argue for an intelligent agent. But moreover, the position he was putting forth about those three authors was not about the origin of the code. And he was claiming that they were arguing that natural selection is what created the code originally versus the optimization of the code, which is a stark dichotomy. And
it's very much like, if not exactly like bait and switch, like we had to, because like if the code evolved, well, if a code evolved, it was a code. And this is the only part of anything that he had said that I actually would nod in agreement with him. Like, yeah, it doesn't say anything about a creator. Yeah, and yes, there was a naturalistic mechanism behind it. Sure, we agree, but that wasn't any part of. And then to try to like shoehorn the creator into that at the end, as a way to misdirect or redirect, when it wasn't part of your argument. The hard part is that there's a part of me that gets it, right? Whenever I'm having a discussion with someone who is a theist of any kind, there is always that, like, I understand that at the base level, below this is your either perhaps presupposition or a properly basic belief, whatever you want to call it, that there is a designer behind it all. And I understand that that's part of it. So I can understand why that might be something that's ticking in the back of his head. That makes sense. But bringing it up isn't even necessarily an issue. It's bringing it up the way he did. That didn't make any sense, because that was just kind of sliding in at the end, like a poke in the eye.
Yeah, that raises bias. Excuse me, Mr. Williams, your bias is showing, because he's showing what's motivating his rhetoric, I would say.
And he's about to double down on it again here in a moment. Not in relation to. You let me respond? You let me respond? You keep telling.
Yeah,
you're not going to let me respond. Oh, wait, ladies and gentlemen, look here. The guy who said that I wouldn't be the one that I would talk over just stated he will not let me respond. So his question in cross-exam. That's funny, buddy. You let me respond now?
It, can you? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I can if you'll. Okay,
Huh?
Are you going to keep your mouth shut? Do we need to mute you? I do, actually. So if you will shut your mouth long enough for me to respond, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Okay. So the fact that a variety of people, and by the way, one of the reasons I quoted from people who don't believe in a creator is the specific reason that this debate is not about intelligent design, it is not about a creator, it is not about creationism, it is not about theology, it is about whether or not, from an information communication theory, the genetic code is a literal code. I have stated this from the beginning, that my intent has nothing to do with creationism, intelligent design, a coder. It is whether or not the code exists, which I have shown beyond doubt. And those gentlemen that you're referring to, while they disagree with me from a philosophical perspective, agree with me that the code is literal. That is not that complicated.
Once again, I'm going to ask the question again, and I'll just keep asking it for the rest of the 10 minutes. Would you agree with them that there is no inventor of the code, and the coding is purely natural selection.
No, I would not agree with him.
Okay. Would you find this question at all interesting if your belief in intelligent design weren't at stake?
Would I find the question? Well, I mean, given the fact of my background in technology, and the part of the reason I got so involved in biology and biotech is the fact that I recognize that we are dealing with literal nanotechnology, and it's way more advanced and way more fascinating than anything humans have ever derived. My continued fascination would probably be ongoing. But in the direct context of why those guys' objection to it doesn't have any bearing for me, is I know as of right now, the question has not been answered. The formation of the genetic code by natural selection has 100% not been proven, and there's a massive undertaking to try and figure out how to make one. So I'm not really sure how you're going to claim that something that has not been proven and is currently under investigation right now, because it has not been answered, is somehow relevant to whether or not the genetic code is actually a literal code, which is the entire point of this debate.
No, it isn't the entire point of this debate. And you're
So you object to the title of the debate?
It isn't the point of the debate, because what
It's not?
stands behind it, what is at
And now we have beyond doubt kind of a point you were making a minute ago about the illusion of where he's wanting to go in his underlying issue. He's clearly stating it and is directly, I mean, I don't know. I love y'all's opinion. I mean, the title of the debate is the genetic code a real code or a metaphor? What about that can remotely be construed to make it about a coder, intelligent agent, creator, et cetera, et cetera? Anybody having a confusion on that?
No, he totally blew it. That's yeah. Same thing I said before. He's just not realizing. I mean, I get the opposite side's perspective on that and the relationship, but if you've agreed to this debate under that title, you got to stay on point there. It's going out of bounds. It's not part of the discussion. And you've been very sharp to not make any arguments that rely on anything outside of, the question of the debate.
Yeah. In and of itself, one has nothing to do with the other. In terms of to clarify, in terms of this discussion.
Right.
If you started digging deeper, of course, because it's at the core of what you believe. That doesn't change that. That doesn't change the topic of this particular discussion.
Exactly.
And
go ahead.
And it's dishonest to try to shoehorn that in an attempt to undermine isn't the right word. I'm having a hard time finding the right word.
Discredit.
Yeah, discredit. That's a good one. To try to discredit what it is you're saying by saying, because at the end of the day, it's all about this God, right? And like I said, because if you delve deeper, which is why John, like we had 3 debates on MDD, right? To get into the meat of it, right? Because at first it wasn't like the first debate wasn't about God itself, right? It was to get into the meat of it. And so if had this been the first of 2 or 3 discussions with Jeffrey, and you're starting at this point, the start of this discussion isn't there yet. Just like the start of our discussions wasn't there yet. It's the establishment. Okay, genetic code. Is it code or metaphor? Okay, fine. That answers the question. Dragging in this, and especially towards the end of it, is in an attempt to discredit, to say, well, it's it all falls. Like he might as well just come out and call you a pre-supper. And
This is throwing poop at the wall, really. At this point, yeah. It's almost like he's conceding that he can't beat you at the agreed upon question, which you never if you had appealed, let's say, or started doing that or appealing to that or something, that would be bad. But he has to try to force it on you. It actually makes him look bad. It's
like having a discussion with someone and they're making good points and you say, well, oh yeah, you're fat.
Right.
Yeah. It is. It's almost like an ad hominem or something, because he should be happy to keep that out of it. So, out of the discussion. And so he can, if he thinks that about you, that's fine, but he shouldn't be bringing it up in the debate. The conversation, we're motivated obviously by our belief in God for such thing, but that wasn't part of it. That's not the question. So it's really gross.
Well, it's kind of for me. It was kind of annoying. My internet sucking so bad. I actually had a third round of videos that I was going to play as my closing statement, which would have anticipated some of his different talking points he's getting into, but didn't play it. But
At stake is your ridiculous claim of intelligent design. In fact, in your videos,
I haven't been claiming intelligent design in this debate. I have not claimed intelligent design. I have claimed it's a code. That's it.
Okay,
Well,
let me break here. Let me break here because we've gotten to the end of the 10 minutes for both of you. So what I want to see, if I've got 2 questions that came in from the audience. One is for both of you and the other one's for Jeffrey. I didn't know if you wanted me to give you these questions.
Okay, so before we get into that part of it, so the opener, I had a clip, 2 clips I was going to play at my end, which I decided not to. But for those of you watching this, you may have remembered my allusion to a major undertaking earlier in the debate. Major undertaking to figure out and how to create a genetic code from a purely naturalistic perspective. And he claimed that everybody that I'd referred to was 100% on natural selection, all those kind of things, which I knew was false. And it's not proven at all, even though he was claiming it was. And what I was going to play was these clips right here, which of those would have been rather entertaining.
So DNA it's an identical process to computer codes. And it's very interesting that, computer ideas about computers developed early in the 20th century. And, Claude Shannon comes along in 1948 and DNA is discovered in 1953. And when we start unraveling DNA, we find out that this incredibly sophisticated communication system has been around for 3 billion years.
Mm-hmm. And we just discovered the communication theory that explains it.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so there needs to be no question that communication theory applies to biology. Okay, all of these concepts can be applied to DNA.
Is that debated anywhere?
Only among people who are ignorant, frankly.
Okay.
Okay. People in the know do not debate this fact.
But not in this credible scientific community. This is well understood.
There is no credible scientific argument to try to say that applying communication theory to biology is somehow inappropriate. Yeah. There's hundreds of scientific papers that go very deep into the subject, and so, no, there's...
I'm talking at the moment with Perry Marshall and Kevin Ham. Perry Marshall is from Chicago in the United States, and Kevin Ham is from Vancouver in Canada, and we have just taken part in the United Kingdom launch of a huge prize to be won by anybody who can produce the genetic code or a genetic code via natural process generating it itself. Mm-hmm. Perry, have I got that right, first of all?
That's right. Any code, any encoding, message decoding system that can come out of an emergent property from chemicals to code would qualify. Yes. And I think it's one of the most fundamental questions in all of science. And it just hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves.
That's right, it hasn't. And I think that's partly why we've been highlighting it in the meeting that we've just had here at the Royal Society in London. You can't get much more prestigious than that, can you?
No, it's
by the way,
it's delightful.
Yes. Now, question perhaps also to Kevin: does it really need to be 10 million? I'm a scientist. To me, that's a huge sum of money.
Yes, I mean I don't know where he's coming from on claiming that was filmed in July of 2019, and I check it on a regular basis, and that that endeavor is still ongoing. And it's being ultimately will be judged by members of the Royal Society, Stanford, Yale, MIT. I mean, it's the most premier academic institutions in the world are judging whether or not you can create what mechanism would be necessary to create a communication system from scratch. So whether or not you want to argue that in favor of an intelligent agent being necessary, which is what I look at, that has nothing to do with whether or not you still have to figure out how one can exist, and whether, if you're having to figure out how to create one, or to recreate one, then you must already have one that you're trying to copy and replicate. Like, this is pretty basic.
Do you need God to create a process or a natural process that can create a code?
I mean, well, that's where my mind comes from. It's like, okay, I've got to come up with arbitrary assigned values. I have to have decoders. I have to that know both sides of the source and target alphabets. Like, this is a recognized root necessity. Like, you must have this. So either somehow you have value assignments to source and target alphabets, you have translators that all create themselves, or you have to have a intelligent agent that can create them, like, and knows what the end outcome is the objective is. Like, that's it. But that's where we're at now in terms of what must be accounted for. It's, I don't know. It's not that.
Well, so there's two things. First is a question, because one of the first video bit that you played talked about the fact this has been around for 3 billion years. And so, John, I just don't know this about you. Are you an old Earth creationist or young Earth?
I mean, I lean towards young Earth, but that has zero relevance to the aspect of code and whether or not something is or is not. I'm simply
saying because that mathematician was like, 3 billion years, right? 3 billion years doesn't fit into the young Earth model, right?
Well, true. But that really, to me, this is where I get kind of irritated with some of the YEC, OEC, TE, like the heated back and forth and everybody hating each other and talking much trash. Is, I'm like, do I personally think that there's logic and arguments in favor of young Earth? Yes. Is there potential evidence if the conventional paradigm is correct for old Earth? Okay. But in the relation to, and I've had this debate with folks, I oftentimes when I'm arguing about abiogenesis and such, I'm like, look, I argue it from the conventional timeline. And it's like, when you look at what is necessary from the current standard conventional paradigm, you've got somewhere between 200 and 500 million years before you have to account for like photosynthesis evolving. And right now we can't even, trying to pull this off, we can't even figure out a way without enzymes and all this other kind of stuff, unless you're doing it like synthetically, from just a naturalistic perspective. We can't get we've got like 21 RNA nucleotides to bond together, and not even in an actual sequence or in any kind of code value. We're talking about just getting, this is why I talk about the differentiation between like DNA versus genome versus genetic code, all that kind of stuff, is we're not even able to get the foundational components to come together in the right way before. And that's not even talking about how does the code get created. We're talking about just the formation of the baseline pieces. And then this is what I say, from to answer a little more on your question about the old Earth, young Earth, is in relation to the intelligent agent being necessary. When you're looking at all of the things that are required for the most simplistic form of life to exist, the improbabilities dramatically surpass the probabilistic resources available, not just for our planet, but for the whole freaking universe. And I mean, I'm talking like vastly surpass them. And that's we're not talking about, and one of the things that drives me up the wall, sorry for my long-winded tangent here, but all the stuff about like, oh, you're not accounting for all the simultaneous actions that are happening. I'm like, no. I'm accounting for all of the potential atomic actions for the entire freaking universe. It doesn't matter whether the actions are happening simultaneously or not. The improbabilities dramatically surpass the total number of actions possible in a 13.7 billion year old universe. And per the conventional paradigm timeline, you've got a max of 500 million years to work with. So your total number of probabilistic resources available shrinks exponentially. And it's like, oh, we have trillions of opportunities. It's like, yeah. You're completely ignoring the improbabilities that are being discussed, and then direct empirical evidence in terms of how ridiculously freaking complicated this is and how improbable that it is to actually occur. And the different experiments that are doing, oh, we're getting closer. Really? Are we really? No, actually, we just keep finding out there's more and more things that we have to account for. and oh, I forgot how to solve this one little piece over here. And then in doing so, I found that there's 15 more that I have to account for. And my last piece, and I'll yield to let you guys talk. I'm sorry, but if the destination keeps getting further away, to claim that you're getting closer is just a false premise. Good.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I forget where was it I read that the more we learn, the more we realize we have more to learn, right? And so we know less and less, but we know less and less about more and more. I'm not qualified to address some of the things you said as far as the stuff like that goes. I was purely curious as to whether you're young Earth or old Earth. But what I go back to is, well, because what you can answer if you choose to go to the route to say, okay, well, there's all these things we don't know, and we don't seem to have enough time to do this, to posit a supernatural explanation. You can just as easily posit an unknown natural, right? But I don't want to get into that massive can of worms.
Well, I get what you're saying, but I think where you may be misconstruing the point that's being made is at some point there has to be, and I'm saying is in any other context, right? At some point you would just concede. I'm talking about like a forensic investigation perspective, right? Mm-hmm. At some point you would concede that the plausibility of something happening without a human having, like an intelligent agent having to be involved. Like even if you don't know all the variables, or there might theoretically be some hypothetical where this could have occurred, at some point, a rational person is going to be like, I don't think it's remotely plausible for this to have, based on all the evidence and all the necessities that we know are required for this to, the bare necessities for something like for X to happen. At some point, you're going to recognize like it's more probabilistic that the intelligent agent was required than that it could happen through random chance and undirected process. And that's where things are. And this is why I say, like, the more that we are discovering about, like, we didn't even have some of the imaging technology until relatively recently to actually even begin to truly comprehend the complexities of a ribosome, for example. And that is just, the complexity of it is getting like out the freaking wazoo. Well, guess what? Supposedly, it's one of the very first things that was supposed to have evolved, but we're finding out it's one of the most complex things. And and then when you get into like Dr. Gart and I were talking about this earlier, of how the RNA world is dead. And now you've got the RNA peptide world, because they've recognized that the RNA world is not actually plausible by itself because of all these different things they're discovering, even though for 35, 40 years, it was like, oh, RNA world, we've got this. We're going to figure this out. And then it's like, oh, well, crap. Like he was telling me, anybody who doesn't believe me on this, go to my stream earlier today. Dr. Gart and I were talking about this on the paper he published recently, like in the last year. Actually, I think it was the last 6 months, actually, on this whole topic. The reviewer of his paper that is published in a peer-reviewed journal commented to him and like, hey, you know that RNA world is dead, right? Because he made a reference to it. And he was joking about it. He's like, man, I'd put that in there because I got so tired of hearing about anyway, he's like, I've been predicting that RNA world would be dead for years, and it's finally gotten to the point where everybody's finally come to the realization that it's gone. Now let's move on to the next one. Let's figure out a new hypothesis. But my point being that just denotes that there's recognition. You have to have more than one thing evolving, or not evolving. You don't have evolving. You don't have natural selection yet until you have this. That was, by the way, the point of Dr. Gart's paper, was without the code, you can't have natural selection via replication. And that was the whole point.
Evolution doesn't start until my understanding, and I'm not an expert. My understanding is you don't have evolution until life is there. You have to have life in order for evolution to take over, for natural selection to take over.
Well,
that's my understanding.
Well, that's what many people have argued. There's different folks who try to keep claiming that you can just have chemical evolution before the...
Ken Hovind talks about chemical evolution.
Well, no, I mean, chemical evolution is a recognized field. I mean, chemical evolution is the...
You're way outside my
origin of life. But the whole point that's being made is that in reality, your point is correct. Like until you have a self-replicating mechanism that can contain and pass on heredity and that information that's required for that, you don't have evolution.
Yeah.
And this is why, in the context of the whole point, in addressing old Earth, young Earth, all kind of stuff, is I'm like, if young Earth is correct, then you can just anything to do with the not needing an intelligent agent just goes out the window. Like if young Earth is correct, then you're nuts to think that everything just evolved through undirected process, right? You're an idiot if you think that. If young Earth is true. The point I'm making is that even if old Earth is true, when we're looking at what is the time available and what is required to have occurred, the time doesn't. It's like, okay, cool. So you got some extra time to work with. Whatever. It doesn't change the fact that it's
I think from my perspective, what it comes down to, and I don't want to hijack this. This is your thing, and it was on a totally different subject. And we can pick up the conversation or have a discussion about it another time if you wanted to. But if it seems more reasonable to me, because the amount of times we have established supernatural causation is exactly zero. Everything that we've ever come to an understanding about, we've come to it through naturalistic means. So it only seems reasonable to say, okay, so here are these things, and there's lots of things, and you're 100% correct. And there's so much. To hell with what the experts know. There's a lot more that I don't know. But there's lots of stuff that the experts don't even know. They don't know how this works yet. A few years back, I read something, not a few years back, but I read something about how a few years back, how RNA formed on clay. So they came up with this, RNA forming on clay. And then you were right in what you said, in that there were more hiccups along the way, right? We have no idea what prebiotic Earth was like. So we can't simulate that. So all kinds of problems, but it just seems more realistic, or more, to tongue in cheek, your channel name. It seems more plausible that we will come up with a naturalistic explanation for it, because that's all we've ever come up with. We've never been able to identify supernatural causation without begging the question. But again, I don't want to derail.
I get that point. I think and this is where I often talk about and I'm not addressing this towards you, and I'm talking about from a general. What I'm about to say is not being directed at you.
I get it. Sure.
I understand your point. I think the two things. Number one, the key differentiation factor is as we have gained knowledge, we have things that they become more simplistic, right? I'm talking about the previous things that used to be espoused to the supernatural, right? Lightning and all that kind of stuff, right? As we learned about electricity and static and all those things and how that stuff works in physics.
Lots of things we used to attribute to gods, sure.
Right. Those things became more simplistic, right? We have the polar opposite with biology. I mean, the absolute polar opposite of, it's not, back when they thought we were just goo, right? And cells were just like this, little paste, and they kind of merged together, and there was nothing crazy going on underneath. The premise of not needing a God, creator, intelligent agent, whatever term you want to use, for it to come into existence was in a totally different perspective, right? Now we're learning that we have to account for robots, code, nanotech machines, completed systems. You have biophoton communication. You have quantum processing. You have all these different things that are going on, and it's like screaming at you of the naturalistic explanations are not coming. We're not getting closer to understanding it. We're getting further away from understanding it the more we learn about it, which is the polar opposite, of, as we learn more about physics, we begin to understand lightning. Now, if the opposite was happening, right? If it was like, this is completely circumventing the laws of physics, right? Then I'm talking about lightning. Then it would be like, that might be some supernatural action if it's directly violating the laws of physics, right?
Oh, sure. It's like I remember when I was in public school. One of the things we learned in like grade school science was the atom was the smallest particle. There's nothing smaller than the atom,
right?
Because that's all we knew at the time. And now there's
Right.
quarks and all kinds of other. I don't even know what the smallest things are now. And you're right. And the talk about the supernatural things, the lightning, the good crops, bad crops, favorable weather, unfavorable weather, all the things that were attributed to gods. And then we found the naturalistic explanations for all those things. So in the same way, you're correct in what you said, in that it's getting more and more complex. And in some ways, it seems like we're further and further away from the answers. The one thing that's never happened, not ever, is when we had a naturalistic explanation for something, it was then replaced by, oh, you know what? Actually, that was God. That wasn't a naturalistic thing. Right.
But if naturalistic processes don't work,
has never happened.
Yeah, but if naturalistic processes are only getting worse and intelligence is the only thing we're seeing that is successful in the lab, what would you conclude?
That to posit a creator still begs the question.
But the naturalistic camp is not making progress, just like Maddox just explained.
Oh no, you're absolutely right.
Would you?
Tony is it? Hi.
Yeah. What's up, man?
Yeah, no, it's cool. My explanation to that would be an unknown natural, so something that we don't yet know.
Okay, let me ask.
Is a more reasonable explanation than a supernatural thing, which we've never shown, not once, not any time ever.
Maybe they would both require faith, since we can't prove either one fully. But you're still holding out for the naturalistic explanation?
I'm not holding out for the naturalistic explanation. I'm saying it's more reasonable given the only explanations we've ever had throughout the history of history have been naturalistic.
Let me ask you this. If we never proved abiogenesis in the lab, would that still prove that it happened naturally? And if we did prove it, wait a minute, if we did prove it, would that still prove it happened naturally? Do you guys win either way? Do you guys win either way?
I don't know. I'm not. I don't. One thing I don't do is pretend to and talk about things that I don't understand, and I don't fully understand that. So I couldn't answer that question for you. My answer would be I'm not sure.
And intelligence, you would go ahead.
No, that's fair, and I think Michael's trying to be. He's being honest.
Yeah.
He's not being the dodge artist like the majority of the people that we interact with on this particular topic of a. We're just we have answers to everything. It's fine. It's good. I guess, like I said, Michael, the only point I'm making is the differentiation between the things that are being discovered, right? Like, I don't think anybody would ever argue that any of the other aspects you're referring to have source code.
Sure. Yeah.
No, they're necessary for them, and that's why I say in the context, and this is why I very often in a lot of the debates and stuff in the conversations. There's a reason that I attempt to follow a logic flow of I'm not necessarily stating that biology proves that God exists. I am arguing that it is dramatic evidence in favor of there having to be a preceding intelligent agent in order for me to exist. Then from there, I have to look, if that is true, and if the evidence is from a probabilistic perspective, the evidence is in favor of that being the correct conclusion. Then from there, I have to look at the next stage and say, okay, if that is true, then what is, and I'm seeing this in a real observable methodology, and all these things that I'm observing in real time now. Nobody would ever argue that similar things could exist without an intelligent agent. I can then look at the next layer of things in the context of like cosmology and stuff and the fine-tuning of the universe and all these different aspects and say, okay, if my existence requires an intelligent agent and the universe theoretically, based on the evidence, it's a plausible conclusion that the fine-tuning, for example, would be evidence in favor of an external agent to the universe itself. Does that lead me to a rational conclusion that there is evidence in favor of a creator, whether or not it's the Christian God or some other unknown God or whatever, or just purely deistic, whatever, is there evidence for that? And just from a top level perspective. And then if that is true, and then my last point on it, if that is true, if those two things are true, then it is likely that some aspect of religion is correct. Now, does that mean that Christianity is the only possibility? No, it doesn't. Does it mean that we could all be wrong? It does. There's also two things, but that still doesn't mean that it's not the plausible conclusion that there is one. And now it's up to me to analyze and determine, look at the evidence for the different options out there, and then come to the conclusion to which one is the most logical conclusion. And I think that this is where a lot of the confusion and the conflict comes into play. And it's why I always try to let's argue this first. That's why in our debates, we had I got pissed off at you guys because we were debating evidence for theism. And you guys wanted to get into the Christian God. And I'm like, well, that's not what we're here to debate. And because in my opinion, it's a waste of time to debate just on the Christian God if you're not even willing to debate, I'm rhetorically here, on whether or not there is evidence for any God, period. Because we're going to dismiss that outright. Then what the hell are we even doing wasting time arguing over a specific religion?
No, it's true. And I've heard you, you've made the same, the one thing that I would never call you is inconsistent. You've made the same arguments for as long as I've been aware of you. That there's, that it's the more probabilistic explanation given these things. And all I'm saying is that I can take a step back and I can say that we can just as easily posit an unknown natural. And that just as easily explains it, because we don't So I've heard it described by theists this way. You take the circle. You take a circle and you put a dot in the middle. You say, "This is how much you know about." This is how much you know. Do you know? How much do you know about everything in the universe? And an honest person will say, such a minuscule, such a minorly small number, like 0.00000000001%, right? Do I know everything about all of the known universe? Well, could it be that the God exists in a part of something that you don't know? Well, sure. That's reasonable to say a God could exist in that, but you could just as easily find a naturalistic explanation for that. And all I'm saying is when we stand back and we see that we've never found a supernatural explanation for anything. Not at all, not anywhere ever. Every explanation we've ever come up with has been naturalistic in nature. And so it is more plausible. So you say okay, is it more plausible that given the unbelievable complexity and the detail that you've gone into tonight and what you've gone into in other discussions that I've seen is incredibly complex, incredible detail. The ribosomes, the DNA, the coding molecule, all that stuff, unbelievably complex. And then to say, well, then there has to be, I think one of the lines you've used before is, in any other context, you would say, if you look at a computer or a car or a cell phone or whatever else, you say that there has to be a designer. There has to be. Sure. Okay, fine. We know that this thing had a designer. Of course. Right? Because these things don't occur in nature. Right? Fine. I don't have a problem with that. But to take it that step further, and to assign supernatural causation, when we've never established supernatural causation in anything, and to say, well, it has to be in this instance. Everything requires a designer. You have to install a terminus, right? And Christians are not alone in this, right? Whether it be a Muslim or a Hindu, or Hindus maybe more because they're polytheistic in nature. All these are the different things. But to posit supernatural causation and say, but this thing doesn't need a designer is just special pleading.
We could say materialism are the gaps, though. And where did all these initial laws and where did all this setup come from to begin with? And that goes back to abiogenesis.
What do you mean by laws?
Well, that goes back to abiogenesis. If we dumped a bunch of chemicals in a test tube, shouldn't a primitive cell come out? Shouldn't it self-assemble on its own, according to you guys?
Sorry, can you repeat that? You gacked out a bit on my end. Can you repeat that?
If we took all the life-friendly molecules and chemicals and dumped them in a test tube, shouldn't a primitive cell come out?
Oh, I'm not a biologist. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so.
Right, but that's what you guys believe. You're the.
When did I say that?
Well, you accept abiogenesis?
Do I accept that living matter came from non-living? Yes.
Yes, naturally, without intelligence.
Yes.
Right, and it's only getting worse. That process, which Maddox was explaining, it's moving towards our favor, not you guys.
How did you arrive at that?
Well, the part of the reason, the point Tony's making is that unless you want to, like, we understand the laws of physics and chemistry, right? And we know what is feasible in a lot of instances, right? The majority of them. And this is one of the things I discussed with Dr. Tour when he was on my interview with him. He was talking about this. He's like, we understand chemistry.
Right.
And if you, unless you want to argue that the laws of chemistry are different in some other galaxy or on a different planet than they are here, and there's somehow like other elements that don't exist. Oh, well, wait. We still have to. We know the chemistry of the elements on our planet. So even if there are some other ones somewhere else that we don't have yet, that doesn't really have any relevance to what is necessary from a chemistry and a physics perspective for us to exist and our knowledge of it. That's what I was saying. You're going back to the aspect of as we learn more about how things work, we know what has to happen in order for them to occur. And when you have to have all these different things simultaneously to make it work, and it's like, okay, so either all these things had to create themselves that are we can't even get them to form like a minuscule fraction of what's necessary, and then you just claim that it's not, and it all has to happen at the same time at some point. Like at some point you have to have them all in the same place at the same time. There's no way around this.
Michael,
let's not go. Danny's been trying to get this question in. And he says, I think it's for you, Michael. We haven't seen non-natural causation. Is he talking about scientists, the very people that don't look for that?
I don't know anybody. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I haven't seen non-natural causation either.
Or I think where we're ultimately where I'm coming from anyway is it's like I said, at some point you have to either at least concede that there is a point in which a intelligent agent would be the more plausible conclusion. If you're always going to hold out 100% for there's something we don't know about, then you have to basically suspend all restrictions for anything that we observe based on the laws of physics and chemistry, right? And if, for example, would you be willing to concede that it is not remotely plausible, even though they exist, that the ASCII alphabet and code base could create itself? Or would there always be an intelligent agent? It's like the zeros and ones and equaling A, B, C, D, E, F, D, G, the numbers, the base. Well, binary is the alphabet, and then ASCII is the code. It's been created using the binary alphabet.
Okay.
So do you think there's any
that, right?
Yeah, an intelligent agent. It was actually the first version was created back in like 1701, I think it was, well before computers even existed, obviously. But the logic was being created, and they did it. But that's why I get so irritated with the sidebar. That's why I get so irritated with idiots who argue about like it's just electrical impulses in a computer. It's like, you dumbass. It was invented in 1701, 1704, something like that. Do you actually think that when they invented it, they were using electric impulses as the medium, which was which was being used to transmit the information? Obviously not.
No, probably not. Yeah.
Because they didn't know how it worked yet. Like Ben Franklin hadn't come along yet, you know. But my point is that, well, I'll go back to my question. Like, would you be willing to concede that a code base using binary to represent the English alphabet would always require an intelligent agent to be created?
Yeah, it's probably
That's the most plausible explanation, right?
Yeah.
So now that we are storing, humans are investing billions to store data in DNA, right? And we are using syntax and using nucleotides and codons as syntax, all that kind of stuff, exact same logic. We're just changing the value assignment to, instead of being equal to an amino acid, it's being equal to our data that we can translate back into binary and render on our computers. If you come across a DNA strand that has the schematics for some robot stored in it, just because it's in a DNA strand, would you come to the conclusion that there wasn't an intelligent agent that was necessary to both create the data that was initially being, or to create the initial schematic data, and then an agent necessary to store the data in the DNA?
Ooh.
And
I
what
don't know,
would your
if I'm being 100% honest, you're almost talking over my head. Like, you're talking about stuff I really don't understand all that well.
Okay, so you have you got the sketch, right? The blueprint, the house blueprint, right?
Okay, sure.
And
Okay.
so it could be on a piece of paper, or you could turn it into a digital file, right?
Sure.
Now let's say that I have taken the blueprint for the house, and I have taken it from, it's being stored in a binary version, right, on your computer. And then we now have technology to be able to render that, or to transfer that into a DNA strand. Okay, so we can actually store the exact same data in DNA. This is happening across the globe right now.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's nuts. The question I'm asking you is, if you came across a DNA strand, and then through investigation were able to discover that there was actually a house blueprint stored in that DNA strand, would the most plausible and most rational conclusion be that an intelligent agent was required to have designed the house blueprint and then to have stored it in that DNA strand?
Given what we know about the nature of blueprints and houses, yeah, I would say that seems most reasonable.
Okay, so even though you don't know who it was that did it, you would conclude that there was one that was the most rational conclusion.
I don't know who made the computer I'm talking to you on, but I know, I'm pretty sure it was put together. Well, it may have been put together by machines, which were designed by people.
Well, at this point, yeah. I mean, there's no telling. There's probably like a few little steps that are done by humans now for inspections and such. But the point I'm making is that what we are discovering is that in DNA sequences, we have not figurative but literal engines on the molecular level that are stored in DNA sequences. It's actual motors. It's freaking nuts. We have trucks, or like little engines that and motor proteins that actually walk. They literally take steps. It's freaking nuts. They were being able to, we have now the technology to be able to videotape this in real time. It's amazing. And my point is that if you have data and three-dimensional schematics for nano robots that can have, like the helicase can do, well, there's different types of them, but they range from 10,000 to 100,000 RPMs. It's a freaking motor.
Okay.
And so my point is that if it's the more rational conclusion, even if you don't know who created it in terms of a house blueprint, if you have incredible engines, schematics in a DNA strand, and we know that it's coded for it, and it replicates it every time, and it goes through a 3D printer, which is the ribosome, and it executes the X, Y, and Z axis, the time variable, and the element, just like a 3D printer does. And we can program it, we can modify it, do all these different things, just like we would anything else. And then we're going to argue, ultimately, we're arguing over whether or not it is more rational that a 3D print script for a nano robot or an engine or whatever is more plausible to have created itself through undirected process, or an intelligent agent was necessary. That's where we're at now. It's like,
Oh, no,
do I think that
and
nanotech creates itself, or needed a designer? When, especially my last point on this, I'll let you talk, is like something like your potassium ion channel, for example. It has voltage gates that open and close. It has there's sodium ion channel has pumps and reserve pouches and all this. Like, it's freaking incredible stuff. And it has like the potassium ion channel, I think, has 1,849 parts. It's like, it's optimized to the physical maximum from the absolute extreme from a physics perspective. Like, you cannot get more optimal. And this thing
And
is,
if all those things are designed, then clearly we are too.
Good point.
Right.
And what would be the
right?
What would be
or there's an unknown natural cause that we haven't discovered yet.
well, I get all that, but my point is, which one's the more plausible one?
Well, given that, like, and I'm not trying to obfuscate the point, but to me, like, to what seems more plausible to you seems less plausible to me, because we've never demonstrated anything supernatural. And and I understand that we're not necessarily talking about Christianity or anything else like that, but like the Bible lays out how you can actually test the methodology, right? There's lots of Bible verses that say, whenever two or more of you are gathered, I'm there. Anything you can ask for me, it'll be done in heaven for you. If you ask anything for me, it'll be done so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. And then later on, the Bible says, but you shall not put the Lord thy God to the test, right? So here's the methodology to test your theory, but don't ever do it, right? And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drag Christianity into it, but you're a Christian, right? And so we have this at the end of the day, there's how much we've explained through natural processes. And then there's how much have we ever explained through the supernatural that's ever been demonstrated through the supernatural.
Why do you think they're having so much trouble?
We have everything, and on the other scale we have nothing. And I'm sorry, Tony, I missed what you said. I didn't mean to overtalk you.
Why do you think they're having so much trouble in the lab, even with all their manipulated, controlled processes? And what would be a plausible prebiotic environment? And why aren't they making progress? You keep saying
we have no idea what it was like on prebiotic Earth.
Right, they're speculating.
I don't know that we can recreate that, so maybe we can. Like go
ahead.
If we needed prebiotic Earth, if the only way it could have worked was in prebiotic Earth, and we have no way to synthesize prebiotic Earth, it's not that staggering that we can't make it work again, because we can't recreate prebiotic Earth. If there was something going on then that we can't recreate now, well, of course we can't make it work.
Where would you draw the line in the lab to how manipulated and controlled an experiment could be?
And I'm not trying to be obtuse, but I would draw the line that I wouldn't go into the lab. I'd send the scientists in there, because we're outside of my field of. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how to answer your scientific question.
Okay, if a chemist controlled every step of an experiment, would you say that's plausible for a natural environment, or is he interfering too much?
Is it plausible for a natural environment or for a prebiotic Earth environment?
Any natural environment.
But if we're talking about, one of the things that John mentioned earlier is that we can't make it. We can't do it now. We can't do these things, right?
But what I'm saying is, if we gave chemists everything they needed, where would you draw the line? Where would you say, if you walked into a lab tomorrow and you saw this designed equipment, you saw teams of chemists purifying chemicals, putting into the experiment exactly what they wanted, stopping the experiment, would you say, just by looking at it briefly, would you say that that's a natural environment, or they're finding natural mechanisms to get it to work, and that would be plausible for the early Earth?
Well, you could put together any series of things and call it a natural environment, but would you be recreating prebiotic Earth?
Would it be recreating any natural environment? If you walked into a lab and you saw all this designed equipment and you saw all the steps that they're doing, do you think honestly that would represent any natural environment anywhere?
It would represent the natural environment in that lab.
How would that be a natural environment? That would be a highly manipulated, controlled environment with teams of intelligent minds.
Sure, but it still wouldn't be prebiotic Earth.
Well, actually, what you believe is a bunch of chemicals in a test tube or a chemical puddle, and it happens on its own. So if you have the hand of the intelligent chemist interfering, how would that help your camp?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I want to make sure that I answer you correctly.
If you walked into a lab and you saw the hand of an intelligent chemist interfering at every step of the experiment, they're interfering, they're stopping, they're starting the experiment. I mean, I don't know every chemical pathway, but these laboratories are right. Yeah, these laboratories are very advanced. They have the most advanced equipment, the purification systems. How would that mimic any natural environment anywhere?
I don't know.
But wouldn't that be a problem for your camp?
Yeah, but my lack of understanding isn't evidence for your position.
It's evidence that it takes intelligence to pull off some of this stuff.
And if you could demonstrate that, you'd really have something.
That's what you would see if you walked into a lab. You would are intelligent, are PhD origin of life researchers not intelligent?
Sure, I would say they're pretty intelligent.
Well, that's my point, man.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, I'm missing your point.
What he's saying is, if intelligent agents who have it's like being able to do reverse engineering, right? They're getting to be able to look at completed systems. They're attempting to reverse engineer it and try and create it for themselves, and failing miserably.
Okay, all right, okay.
And
thank you for the clarifier. Now I more understand what Tony was trying to say.
So the point is that this is why I find the whole the prebiotic might have been different type thing to be irrelevant. Is if in the most optimal scenario with intelligent agents who get to look directly at something, they know how to make it work, how it works, but then they can't recreate it when they're trying to.
Mm-hmm.
That does not give any credibility in favor of the harsher environment with the less controlled factors and the less stability. Does not make these complicated things happening more plausible if, per the own admission, you have a less optimal environment to make this happen, and we can't even pull it off in the most optimal environment.
John, it sounds like you just said you knew what prebiotic Earth was like. More
No. Well, nobody in their right mind argues that a lab is a less harsh environment than outside.
Yeah, but
exactly.
But we don't know what prebiotic Earth was like, do we?
Okay, so
prebiotic Earth would have. Yeah, go ahead.
Do we know what prebiotic Earth was like?
Well, it definitely didn't have
hang on, Tony. So the I'm again.
In fairness, John, in referencing back to your conversation with Jeffrey, just please answer the question. Do we know what prebiotic Earth was like?
I'm going to answer your question if you let me finish my sentence.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
In a back to Jeffrey. So from the conventional paradigm, the positions that are taken is that there was higher oxygen, lower oxygen. There were it was hotter, it was colder. There was lava everywhere. All those kind of things, right? You have the late heavy bombardment. You have all these different things that are supposed to have happened, right?
I have no idea what prebiotic Earth was like.
Okay, now these hypotheticals, they're not claiming to know the exact environment down to the freaking pH level on every single possible instance. However, there's only so many pH levels. There's only so many different levels of what was the oxygen, what was the CO2 level, all that kind of stuff, right? So they try these things out in all sorts of different environments based on different things they're deriving from rock layers and all that kind of stuff, right? And now it might not be 100% what the quote unquote prebiotic level was, but they have their own positions they're putting forth, and zero are the level of stability that we can do in a lab. None. Every single other option, just even today, like even in our current environment, there's shitloads of chemical reactions that we can't make happen the second you step outside of a controlled environment of a lab. That's where
can't make happen yet. Is it fair to say that?
No, it's fair to say, and this is why
it's not
fair
to say can't make happen yet. 200 years ago, we
well,
couldn't.
No. Okay, we're talking about actual like the chemical bonds that are necessary, right? The actual binding of different molecules.
And we haven't had the capacity.
Hang on. Hang on. Synthetic biology is. This is the whole point, man. You need to watch the lecture series and then my interviews with Dr. James Tour, because he and I discussed this whole deal and he explained the chemistry. Yeah, he's one of the top 10 rated chemists on the freaking planet.
Okay.
The point he made, and many others have made, and George Whitesides, who's an atheist chemist, but he's one of the most cited chemists on the planet. He makes the same point. Of like a lot of these things are just not even like, we know that outside of a controlled environment, these are not possible from a chemistry perspective. Can the chemical bonds be created inside of a hyper specific controlled environment where we're doing all sorts of things as intelligent agents to manipulate things to get a very specific bond to happen? Yes. But that's like saying, yes, I can take a piece of metal and drill a hole in it and put bolts and nuts through it and connect it to another piece. That doesn't mean that without me as the intelligent agent, that the hole will get drilled, the bolt will get created, and the nut will get formed, and then they will inserted and tightened. Just because something can be done doesn't mean that it will happen, or it's remotely plausible for it to happen outside of the specific actions that are necessary for XYZ to occur. And if those actions that are necessary are not even remotely plausible in a non-controlled environment, then you can just toss them out the window. This one, like I said, this one thing I talked with Dr. Tour of like, because when I say he is one of the highest ranked chemists in the world, okay, he's created his team. About 6 months ago, he was testifying before Congress because his team has created one of the most revolutionary processes. The world has the potential to change. His team created a method to turn any carbon into graphene, which is a semiconductor. It's stronger than steel. It's freaking nuts. Anyway, they figured out a way to use electricity to turn any type of carbon. You can take your garbage and turn it into graphene. This stuff used to cost like $100,000 a kilo. They've now figured out a way to take a ton of coal, which costs $100, and for less than $1 of electricity, they can turn it into graphene in less than a second.
Pretty cool. Where do I buy stock for that?
Yeah, we had a couple private companies on that. This man has had 4 IPOs in the last 6 years. Okay, wow. He's a freaking genius, and he gets into all the details of this chemistry of like, this stuff is not plausible. Like, can it be done? Yes, but this is like, we can do it because we have all these crazy shit that we're doing, and we have all these like special gizmos and all these different things that can force the molecules into the correct angle at the right time. And even then, they can't very often. They can only get the yield is minimal, and they separate out the yield of what they wanted, separate the other crap. But then you have to have all these extra, filters and stuff to wash things out and get it ready to, for what you actually wanted. Now, this goes back to the whole prebiotic environment stuff. Like, it's like, who gives a shit if we can create a minuscule amount of this little compound that we want, that would be needed? It's mixed in with all this other shit. And unless you're going to claim that somehow there's a magic filter that comes through and separates it out, and then puts it over here next to the other thing that somehow magically got filtered out, and now they can bond together and go to the next stage. And oh wait, in that timeline, none of the other things and the degradation and the decomposition of these chemical bonds, that's not going to happen. They just magically stayed together. Wow. 100 million years later, the next thing evolved. It's like, it's a joke at this point. It's like, cool, congratulations, you have a freaking wheel and an axle and nothing else. And then 100,000 years from now, the frame it was created. Well, congratulations, the axle and the wheel rusted out. Like, whoop-de-doo-dah. Like, this makes zero relevance to, other than from a completely hypothetical, extreme level of just desperation to avoid the obvious. And I'm not saying that about you. I'm saying I know you don't know a lot of this stuff. I'm saying for a lot of folks, they don't even want to learn about this because for many, I think, and it's my theory, for many, they don't want to go down these rabbit holes because if they do, you will be forced to either come to the conclusion that somehow the most amazing, mind-bending shit can create itself, or an intelligent agent is necessary and is the only rational conclusion for its formation. Even if you want to get into a potential evolution, different things of that nature, the things you have to even get to that point are freaking nuts. I mean, anyway, I yield. Go ahead. I'm rambling.
How many videos are in the James Tour thing?
His lecture series on abiogenesis specifically, I think he has like 12 or 13. I'm
definitely gonna look him up. It's getting on to like 12:45 where I am, so and I'm starting to fade. So
yeah, me too.
I'll start making less and less sense. Tony, I want to thank you, and I hope I didn't.
Thanks, Mike. You're good, Mike. You're cool, man.
Check
out the Fred Hoyle. Because you brought up the airplane, the 747. Fred Hoyle's got a whole he's got some good stuff on that.
Yeah.
Pre-abiogenesis, and he kind of became a deist towards the end of his life. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny. No, I mean, and it's like we're branching into like when I argue with theists, it's more on morality in the Bible and stuff like that. That's more my forte. But it's hard because I'm always wanting to claw that into my brain. And when like you and when John are talking about these very scientific things, like a lot of it is talking just beyond me. I'll watch some of these discussions, and I've enjoyed watching other talks with Cy Gard on other things. He was on before the non sequitur show debacle. He was a regular on there, and he gave lots of great talks. Really, really good stuff. So yeah, but thanks for having me on. It was good to be here to catch up. John, you and I hadn't had a chance to talk in a long time, and I'd relish the opportunity to have more discussions. I'm not closed-minded to anything that you said. I'm convinced. I mean, I'm an atheist, right? I'm convinced God still exists. But there are other reasons why I'm convinced.
Right. No, I get that, and I'm glad we ever had dialogue. Appreciate you coming on, and I think we may have. Hopefully, we've convinced some of the other atheists out there that I actually can have good dialogue with folks.
Well, it's interesting.
I'm not actually as big of a dick as people think I am. It's just I give as good as I get. So if people are an asshole towards me, I'll be an asshole back. If we have good conversation and back and forth, then
yeah, I mean,
can have good conversation.
You had an unfortunate handicap in the MDD debates, and that was your partner. So maybe we won't open that can of worms. But hopefully he becomes less and less relevant as time goes on. But yeah, that was they were heated contests for sure, and that's why I've tried to have more in the way of just discussions. I think I saw praise in the live chat earlier. I don't know if he's still there or not. But he and I've had some great interactions. He came on the podcast. We've had a quote unquote debate on standing for truth. I'm on there again on the 21st debating the existence of the Christian God with Kenny Rhodes. So anybody watching in the side chat, tune into that. I like Donnie a lot. Donnie's a good guy. He's a Canadian, so I can't hate him too much, even though he's a theist. And yeah, John, if you ever want to come on the podcast, I'd love to have a chat with you.
Yeah, I'm interested in having a conversation. Like I said, I'd say always open to dialogue, as long as it's not going to turn into. I'm not saying accusing you of this. I'm saying as long as it's not going to turn into a dumpster fire of which I'm like, hey, I'm fine with dumpster fires, but I don't necessarily want to walk into it on purpose,
Oh no, for sure.
No, I'm not accusing you of that. I'm talking from a general perspective. But
I've found that you can have. It's like I'm sure your parents said it to me the same way mine did. You'll catch more bees with honey than you will with vinegar, right? You have a discussion. Wesley, your camera's going crazy there. Have a discussion with someone as opposed to just getting on and trying to make yourself heard.
Right.
There's a big difference between those two things. Anyway,
check
thanks
out
for
that James
having me.
Tor stuff, man. Watch some of those James Tor stuff because that's what convinced me.
I wrote it down. I wrote it.
Yeah.
That's curious. I'd be interested to. Oh yeah, Doki Doki. Yeah. Yeah. It's, September 21st. I think it's 8 o'clock. I think it's 8 p.m. Eastern. That'll be a good discussion. Kenny seems like a decent guy.
Yeah, Kenny's very he's a good guy. He loves to open mind and have good genuine dialogue. So should be should be a good one.
Yeah. The content of that conversation that I promise I'm going to leave. I'll stop bombarding your stream. Is he's going to be arguing for the existence of the Christian God, and I'll be arguing for the existence of no God. So,
right on. Well, look forward to it.
Yeah, should be good. Chat, thanks for listening, and hopefully you haven't crucified me too much in there when I go back and look at the chat later. But again, John, thanks, and I guess I'll message you somehow. Is there email contact for you somewhere in your about thing on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, it's logical, plausible, probable at gmail.com.
Okay, that's easy enough. I'll send you an email, and we'll set something up.
All right, sounds good, man. You have a
All right,
great
cheers.
night.
Good night, guys.
All right.
What's up, Wesley? Welcome to the stream. I think it's your first time. How are you doing?
I'm okay. My name is Wesley Lawrence Curry II.
Right on.
Hi.
Well, appreciate you coming on the stream. What brought you into the conversation?
Well, I like a challenge.
All right. Well, what's your perspective? Are you a atheist, theist, don't know, agnostic, atheist? What's your worldview?
Well, I've never doubted that Jesus is God, but my actions are mostly hypocritical.
Okay. So you are a theist who acts like a sinner? Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah.
So you recognize you have a fallen nature and that we're not perfect and might be in need of a redeemer?
I got a real clear picture of how far I had fallen. My head was lifted up as I was in bed. I saw my soul. Though my lips would say I'm washed in the blood and the fashion of the tongue and all that I've heard many say before me, my soul was dead gray ashes, like a Giacometti sculpture made out of barbed wire and dead gray ash. From all the sins I had done, those ashes are death, the wages of sin. In the belly, I saw a pearl of snow white light, a very large pearl, big as a soccer ball, and in it, another pearl. And all the ashes that I saw were wet with a clear oil. So I've been a very evil man. I have not been a good man. Though I claim Jesus is God, my actions do not speak the same thing as my lips.
All right. So do you think you had do you have like a out of body experience or a near death experience? What do you think your experience was?
I saw a dream of two creatures with pointing ears, one cutting a foot off a man's leg, and it didn't bleed. And on the foot cut off was a white sock that was clean and a dirty, fashionable black shoe. And in the dream, I was standing on a hill, and I saw palm trees with dark green on top, dark green and orange red leaves on the bottom with weeds under them. They are on the right. And on the left, I saw straight trees in a row. They're like I fail you. When I fail you, I fail God. From branchless faith is those straight trees. And the foot not bleeding, it means that I fail to believe in Jesus's forgiveness. There was a square pit in front of the creatures and a crooked path of gold and silver spinning of itself behind them. And in the middle, I saw a river curved with no wind on it. And in the night, all the heavens were devoid of stars. I did see a full moon with a bronze aura. The moon means I fail you by blaming and accusing anybody of anything. And I've certainly been a person to blame and accuse people, and I've been wrong every time I did it. I went with the fashion rather than the truth. And in the fashion, it was okay to blame. It was Christian to blame. But I found out I was entirely wrong about that. Blaming is certainly not forgiving. And forgiving is one of the most difficult things that I've been still trying to learn. I don't always want to forgive somebody when they do something against me. I want to get them back. But so if I want to get them back and not forgive them, no matter what it is, I don't really believe in the forgiveness of Jesus Christ. So I told that. And one night, a force paralyzed me. And I believe it was Satan himself. And he told me in my head he was going to turn and toss me violently like a ball. And this was in 2005 on October 10th. And I believe that was Satan paralyzing me. But he could only touch me from the shoulders up. And I believe that me telling that vision had made that pearl of snow white light transform all those dead ashes, death, into light. And I also believe that I told that vision on August 11th, and I asked Jesus to give everybody on the earth bread. None will tell, but I believe he did it, though I've never heard anybody confirm this. I believe enough wheat was grown in heaven and sown and gathered and ground and sifted and kneaded into dough and baked in ovens and delivered by angels for 12 billion loaves of bread on August 11th. But I can't prove it. I also asked Jesus that everybody on earth be given a healed tooth in their mouth. No one has ever said that this happened, so I can't prove that either. But I asked him to, and I said that vision when I asked him to. Now, I don't want to get wordy on you. I'd rather listen now.
No, it's interesting. The there's I've been very fascinated with the spike in NDEs and OBEs and shared death experiences and such that are being documented in a through well-established institutions, and very intelligent folks are analyzing these things and aggregating the data and the anecdotal evidence as well as some of the empirical evidence. And it's it's very, very interesting, some of the different things that are starting to come out. I think in conjunction with some of the other things that have been discussed here tonight, I think the evidence and the difference from a variety of facets for, at a minimum, there being something beyond this materialistic stage of existence that people want to espouse as being the one and only. I think there's more than enough indications that, at a minimum, whether or not a specific God is correct or incorrect, it's very, very likely that there is something beyond, another stage of existence. Would be my
I know in Chicago I was, and it was January in 2003, and I did hear two voices. One said it is time, and the other one said sad and delicious. And one of them was Jesus, and the other one was Satan. But then again, I saw Jesus at Wrigley Field in a pizza pub wearing a Beatles wig. So call me crazy. Seriously.
Well, that would be a little bit far out for sure.
Yeah. There's the guy that created the heavens and the universe wearing a Beatles wig. Okay, he likes the Beatles.
So how much?
I'm going to take off, John. God bless both you guys. Thanks, Maddox.
Appreciate it, Tony. Yeah, good night, man.
All right. God bless.
Well, it sounds to me like you might have been smoking some weed or eating some shrooms on that one.
I've had, sadly, a very seriously evil life of pleasure seeking 10 years ago, but not for 10 years, but before that, some really bad stuff. Yeah.
Well, we've all been there, done. I mean, I say not all, but many of us have been there, done that. I, in no way, shape, form, or fashion, pretend to be a holier than thou and to have not indulged in a variety of things which, in my opinion, but for the grace of God, I would not have survived. And
do you believe that Jesus is God, or do you have another form of religion, or are you atheist? I didn't catch that.
No, I believe that Jesus is God. I believe in the Christian God, and I also think that there is way more to all of these things beyond just what we, the dogma and the orthodoxy has been put forth. I don't necessarily think that it's incorrect, but I also think that there's much more than what has been revealed. And I get very annoyed with people who try to put everything inside of a extraordinarily tight box rather than looking at it from a, okay, here's the parameters that we are aware of. But to think that we actually comprehend, assuming there is a omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, et cetera, assuming that is true, and there is an entity that espouses or is all those things, then the premise of me as a finite being with a limited frame of reference actually being able to understand what that entity is in its entirety is stunningly naive. And it's a naive combination combined with extreme arrogance. And yes, there can be some things that have been revealed, but in no way, shape, form, or fashion do I think I understand it all. And I get rather irritated with people who try to act like we understand everything.
Well, I am certain the second coming has already happened. That he showed himself to everybody on earth 7 times. The first 3 times saying, tell the vision. And then he said, tell the vision, you shall not need the mark. And tell the vision, and you shall heal without money. Then he said, no time to talk, Allah. And then he said, you want war. And the first time of those 7 was August 25th in the year 2005. And the next time was November 5th, 2005. And the next February 22nd, 2006. I did see him on August 25th, 2005. And a child said, it is he. A little girl standing on a park bench at a playground. And there stood Jesus, white robe, dark olive skin, black hair. And he didn't say anything to me. Didn't say a word. But he looked at me like a father looking at his son saying, you're not doing enough, and you know it. And that's what I saw. And I went to a bar at Wrigley Field right after that. A guy walks into the bar, and he says, I just saw Jesus. And I went right to that guy, and I was begging him, tell me more. Tell me, come on, give me some, confidence. Give me some witness, confess, word. Tell me. And no matter what, I could have paid the guy $100 and he wouldn't have said another word about it. He never said another word about it after that. And that's the only evidence I had that this happened everywhere on the earth, is that this guy saw him at the same time I did. We look at each other and we're on a TV now, and in who knows, 50 screens, 173 screens around. Well, Jesus is God and he created everything. He can do anything. And this is one of those new miracles that sometimes confounds.
That's fair. So you do believe that Jesus is God. Do you think you are in need of do you think you are in need of a savior and his forgiveness?
Oh, I believe I couldn't be alive if it were not for him. He created everything. He created me. He created an atomic structure. He created an infinite universe. That man created all that. Yes, I did.
Well, that's good.
And I found the vision part where the foot is cut off. In the King James Bible are these words: your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh, as it were, unto fire. You've heaped treasures together for the last day. And that to me sounds like a foot being cut off on cankered gold and silver. I'm sure it didn't feel like a puffy slipper on his ankle. And the treasure, I believe, is the way Jesus says those people in the pit that were in pieces and none dead and none whole. That is the treasure of God, not made by the hands of man, but made by the hands of Jesus, God. That's a treasure in the pit, not gold and silver and diamonds and rubies. People is the real treasure.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Well, let's see. I've enjoyed time. I'm glad you joined us. I have done a debate, a after show, and then this for 2.5 hours. So I am now coming up on almost 8 hours of running my mouth on YouTube today.
Wow.
I am, and it just hit midnight, so I'm going to call it an evening. It was great talking with you. I appreciate it, and thanks for sharing your story.
So if we meet, one of the first things I'm going to ask you is, would you say I saw green pastures in Psalm 23 in the vision Jesus gave to you and to me.
All right.
That's it. That's all. All right.
Right on.
Love you.
All right.
I don't know you well enough to like you, so we'll work on the like.
I appreciate that. Same to you. You have a great day, man.
You too.
All right, folks. We are going to be wrapping things up. Folks, thanks so much for sticking around for all this tonight and going through the debate and sharing your thoughts. And for everybody who gave super chats, greatly appreciate you as well. And as you consider and contemplate and think about all these different things that have been discussed, I hope that you will continue to ponder, question, and continue to derive rational conclusions for the fundamentals of your existence. And most importantly, that you will always make sure that your conclusions are logical, plausible, and probable. Have a good night, everybody.